Okay.
Let's go ahead and get started, and then we'll have folks join in as they join us.
Okay.
So welcome, everybody. This is the July 9th meeting of the Doney Park Timberline Fernwood Area Planning Committee. Welcome. I'm Brian Bates. I'm co-chair. And I'd like for us to go quickly around so that Melissa can get attendance, unless you already have it, Melissa.
I'm working on it, but it would be good to do the introductions.
Okay. Just go through and just tell us your name, which district you're from, and then Cameron, when we get, we'll come back to you, and I want you to give us a little info about you because you're joining on today.
Will do.
Okay. John Ruggles, you want to go first?
Okay.
Oh, wait. Let me go to Rob because Rob's the co-chair.
Okay.
Excuse me, I don't see him on my screen.
Oh, by no means necessary, but thank you, Brian. My name is Rob Wilson. I'm in District 2 and also the owner of Timberline Firearms.
Okay.
Okay. I'll start this again. John Ruggles, District 2, Planning and Zoning Commission, otherwise unencumbered.
Okay. Evelyn?
She might be having some technical issues.
Let me go to Dave Browning since you're unmuted.
I'm Dave Browning, I guess District 2. I live in Doney Park, and that's about it.
Okay. Harriet?
Harriet, you're muted.
Press bar. Yes.
There you go.
I have to hold it down. I'm learning as I go. I'm Harriet Young, Girls Ranch Road and District 2.
And Harriet, if you can tilt your camera down just a little bit, because we're just kind of there. Oh, now we see all of you.
Oh, how horrible. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. Okay.
All right.
Let me go to Monica.
What's up?
Who are you and what district are you from?
I'm from District 2. I'm in McCall, Idaho, trying to figure out how to do this on my phone. So let me figure everything out, but have a good day. I will be listening.
You're doing well, Monica. Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Benatar.
Hi, I'm Sarah Benatar. I am the Coconino County Treasurer. I live out in Belmont.
And you'll be presenting this evening. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Let's see, who am I missing? Let me go to Laura Hunicke, please.
Laura.
Hi there. I'm Laura Hunicke. I'm retired from NAU. I live in District 4 and have since 2003.
Thank you, Laura. Let's see, Steve Sessions, please.
Yes, sir. This is Steve Sessions. I live in the Jeremy Lane area and the Horseman Lodge area.
Thank you, Steve. Jim, are you there? Clifford?
Yep. Jim Clifford, District 4, Planning and Zoning Commissioner, and work at W.L. Gore.
Wonderful. And Evelyn, did you get unmuted?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm here.
All righty. Let me go back to Watson. Cameron, excuse me, your last name is Watson.
That works.
And Cameron is joining our committee, recently appointed by Supervisor Archuleta.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Cameron Watson. Moved to Flagstaff in 08 to the Timberline area. Was a police officer in Flag for 10 years. I run a nonprofit and then called Over the Rainbow Butterfly Garden, where we deal with people with disabilities. And then we have two private businesses, one which is a BioClean Transport, and then we do in-home care for people with disabilities, and that one's called For Your Family. So we've been in the Timberline area for, gosh, I guess 12 years now.
Good to have you join us, Cameron.
Thanks.
So, Melissa, let me come back to you and you share with us where we're going next, which I think is a review of our June 11th meeting.
We are, and I just want to mention, I believe Jess McNeely is also in the meeting somewhere. He's the iPhone person.
Oh,
Jess is
okay.
talking.
He's multitasking. So
How you doing? Jess McNeely, Community Development Department, Assistant Director and Planning and Zoning Manager. Thanks for everyone getting together.
Okay.
and we have somebody else that just joined us.
Is it Mark Della Roca?
Unmute.
I was muted, but now unfortunately I am not. Yes, it is me. Just thought I'd join on in, check to see what's going on. How you doing, everyone?
Thank you, Mark.
Very good. Good to see you, Mark.
Good to see you all as well.
Okay, I'd like to ask everybody to self-mute, and then Melissa, if you'll take us through some our review of the June 11th meeting, and then we'll go to Sarah Benatar.
I will, and I want to mention Liz Baldwin just joined us.
Yes, I did. Hi.
Hi, Liz. Okay, so the next item would be to review the June 11th meeting notes, and if anybody had any changes or comments to those. Okay, we'll move on then. And the first thing we'll do is we'll get into Sarah Benatar's presentation, and as I'd just like to say a little bit about Sarah. Sarah is our county treasurer, and she has prepared a very interesting presentation to give us an introduction to county finance and where the money goes, where it comes from, and then there's some particulars to Doney Park. So let me get out of this presentation and into hers.
Good job.
Okay.
Thank you, Melissa.
Can you see that? Great.
So as Melissa mentioned, my name is Sarah Benatar. I am the Coconino County Treasurer. So I put together a presentation that talks a bit about county finance, but also talks a little bit about treasury and how the two go hand in hand and the impacts it has on the county, but our taxing districts. So Melissa, am I going to just have to say next slide for you?
Yeah, if you would.
Next slide. So a little bit about myself. I've been serving as the county treasurer since 2014. It is an elected position. You do serve for 4 years. So I'm not originally from Arizona. I ended up coming here for work. But I am originally back east. I got my undergraduate degree from the University of Michigan. I also hold a special certification for government investment professional. I am also a certified public finance professional through the University of Missouri. I currently serve as the president of the Arizona County Treasurers Association and have done a lot of work both across the state but also nationally in terms of just treasury management and financial management. So I've partnered with organizations such as PayPal to do white papers. I've spoken at national conferences. So I'm pretty experienced in this area. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for me personally, but I kind of fell into this. But So a lot of people ask, what's the duty of the treasurer? So the treasurer is really the custodian of all public dollars. So we're most known for property tax collection, and that means we do all the mailings for all the districts in terms of your property tax notice. We also collect on behalf of every taxing district in Coconino County, and we also distribute all their money. But the bulk of what our office actually does is we are the bank for the county and all the taxing districts. So it's everything you can think of when it comes to banking, receiving in their monies. We also, we call them warrants, but check that every single taxing district, including the county, issues. Our office is responsible for clearing to make sure that it is a valid expense in terms of what the districts have presented us with. We manage all of their credit lines, debt service, so we repay all the bonds for like the fire districts, school districts, etc. So we are pretty busy in the banking industry. And another piece of what we do, which most known for property taxes, bulk of what we do for banking, and probably what treasurers across the country have gotten in trouble for is investments. We manage the investment portfolio for all the taxing districts in the county. And that's something that unfortunately across the country there have been issues. We've been doing great here, but that is another thing that the treasurer's office do. So with that, I'll go on to the next slide. So I wanted to really point out what's the difference between finance and treasury, because some people may think there's an overlap, and there is. We do work very closely with finance, but finance really focuses on the strategy and that long-term focus for an organization. So that includes things like accounts receivables, purchasing, creating financial plans, creating financial statements for organization, working on the audit, and overall staying in control over the use of the funds that the organization has. So treasury, our focus is more short term. We're looking to make sure that there's enough cash on hand to meet all the needs and obligations that a district has. So in our office, we focus a lot on cash management, financial risk management, our investments, cash flow analysis, and of course, execution. So really, finance deals with more, think about like budget. Do I have this capacity? What can I do with these funds? For my office, we care about, do you have the cash on hand to pay these obligations? So I usually tell districts, that's great, you have in your budget, but do you have the cash today to pay this bill? If you do or you don't, it's our responsibility in the treasurer's office to, one, figure that out, and two, if you don't, handle the borrowing credit line side of the house, so to speak. So I'm pretty informal, so does anyone have any questions so far on that? Okay. So types of revenue. There are certain types of revenue within government entities, and so I wanted to make sure I captured it all on one slide. I'm going to go into pretty much all these in more detail. So, but you could see there are quite a bit of options, more than just property taxes or sales tax that government entity can actually receive revenues from. I do want to stress, though, that property taxes and sales tax usually make up the bulk of revenues for all taxing districts, whether you're a school district, a fire district, county, city, etc. The bulk of those revenues do come from some sort of tax. Next slide. Here we go. So I thought I would do one slide on taxes in Arizona. So first of all, property taxes. That is every single taxing district in Arizona can actually levy some sort of property tax. So taxes are applied in, we process the tax roll in late August, beginning in September of every single calendar year. And so, for example, 2020 property taxes, we actually won't even know those numbers until about 1st of September, because districts are actually right now in the middle of adopting their budgets. They are supposed to be turned into the board by August 1st, and then the board actually has until I believe it's either the second or third Tuesday of the month of August to adopt all of the tax rates in the district. Once that's adopted, there's this process involved. Brian, did someone have a question?
Yes, Sarah, I don't know if the rest of the folks are hearing you clearly. I'm not. And I'm wondering if you could speak into the microphone more directly.
Yeah, sorry about that. Is this better?
No.
Sarah, I think it's your connection, your computer connection possibly.
Here. Let me do this. Let me grab my phone and I'm just going to call in.
Okay.
Yeah, I was worried this would happen. I do have that issue sometimes. So I will be right back.
You gotta love Zoom.
Brian, in the meantime, Bernice joined us.
Oh, wonderful. Bernice, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Hi, I'm Bernice Carver, and I live over by the Turkey Hills.
So you're in District 4.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us, Bernice.
Thanks for your patience, everybody. Here she is.
Is this better? Is this better? Is this better? Oh.
There's an echo. You probably need to turn off your computer audio.
I know.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I'll mute it for you.
Thank you. I crashed my Surface Pro.
Sarah, you still have two open.
Yeah, I can't mute your computer audio for some reason. Do you want to continue to try with the computer audio?
Can you hear me now?
There's still a delay, but go ahead and give it a try.
Hello.
I can't hear. Can people hear?
No, she's not talking yet.
Okay. Let me ask you this question. Maybe, Melissa, do you know, or maybe we can ask this question. Because 1/3, I think this is going on in Arizona, 1/3 people have not paid their property taxes. They're, giving extended time for property taxes because of the COVID. Is that going to affect our funding this year or probably 2021, right?
Good question. I hope we'll get back to her.
Okay.
For that, I don't know.
Because, we're not going to have anything. With COVID, we're not going to have any money.
Liz, let's hold that and let Sarah finish and then come back, please.
Okay. Oh, I thought you said ask questions in between, but wait till the end. Okay.
Well, when she's available. And what we might do is, hold on, we'll try this again. If Sarah Benatar cannot get this working, we might give her a chance.
Is that better?
Oh, that's a lot
Yes.
better. Thank you.
Very good. Bravo,
Good job, Sarah.
Smarty pants.
Sorry about that. I could
Good
not
job.
get my, this has happened unfortunately before, and that's why, Melissa, I asked you to run the
It's okay.
presentation.
I understand what's going on out there.
So thank you.
Sarah, real quick, if everybody else would mute themselves, then it decreases the background noise, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know how much you guys got out of the property taxes, but I'll just pick up there very quickly. So we actually won't know the property tax numbers for 2020 until about September 1st of this year. And the reason is because over the summer months, taxing districts are actually working on adopting their budgets. And so then the Board of Supervisors will adopt the tax rate in August. And that starts the process between our office and the assessor to process, quote unquote, the tax roll. So your taxes are the really simple formula to know what your taxes are equal to is your assessed value times the tax rate. And so tax rates will vary depending where you live in the county. But that's pretty much the very simplistic formula. All property taxes, so schools, fire districts, counties, are able to levy a property tax. I will say that and you will see a little bit later, but for fire districts and school districts, the bulk of their revenue actually is property taxes. So the next type of tax here that we have in Arizona is sales tax. And Arizona is one of only a handful of states that actually is considered a home rule state. So that actually allows for cities, counties, towns to adopt their own sales tax rate. So there is a statewide sales tax rate, which is 5.6%. The county has a sales tax rate of 1.3%. And depending where you are in the county, so for example, if you are in city of Flagstaff limits, they also have their own sales tax rate. And so that again is really unique to Arizona and a handful of other states across the country. I do want to also point out that, so for example, county sales tax, you may remember a couple years back that it did go to the ballot in terms of the sales tax for road improvements, and those sales tax usually do have, they do eventually sunset, and so they're not a forever tax. So a lot of times they have to be voter approved. They do eventually have an end date. I do also want to highlight though that sales tax can go up and go down very drastically. And so a great example of that right now is unfortunately in the middle of this pandemic, sales tax has dropped significantly, not just in Coconino County, but across the state because people are not going out. They're not buying the different goods in our community because we are a very tourist county that has impacted our county significantly. So unlike property taxes, which property taxes can go down, but there is about a 2-year lag from when a property is valued to when it's eventually taxed. The drop is not as significant as immediate as sales tax, which that hit would be pretty immediately. So we're starting to see that right now, for example, sales tax decrease. So again, all these different revenue sources, they do have their benefits, and they also, you know, pros and cons and everything. And then there's a couple other taxes here in Arizona. So auto in lieu, for example, that is a tax that you would pay if you end up purchasing a car out of state. So if you go into Nevada, buy a car, you bring it back, you do have to pay an auto in lieu tax. Excise taxes, so those are taxes on certain goods and services. An example of that is they're called, they're called GIPLETs, which are government release excise taxes, and those are actually taxes on pieces of property that are owned by the government but are essentially leased out for economic development or other purposes. A great example of it in Coconino County is actually the federal concessionaires on federal land. They actually pay GIPLETs. So Santerra, Delaware North, Airmark, they all are paying a GIPLET tax, which is a type of excise tax. There's, of course, some taxes on utilities, and I put interest and penalties on there. So that would be, for example, if you are delinquent on your property taxes, there are interests and penalties that do have to be charged by statute. That is considered, quote unquote, a dollar amount tied to other taxes, and that actually is collected by the county. Next slide. So licenses and permits, that is another source of revenue for the county. And that includes, you know, different licenses, liquor license, marriage license, you've got zoning and use permits, building permits, environmental quality permits. These are not major sources of revenue, but they are still very significant in county budgets. And a main reason too why they are significant is because these are revenue sources that can go towards the county general fund. So the county general fund are usually dollars that fund different departments in the county that are required by statute. But there is an outside source such as a grant that you can actually collect that revenues for. So a great example of that is county finance, county treasurer's office. My department is 100% funded by the general fund. And so these different types of revenue sources, such as licenses and permits, may seem small in comparison to property taxes and sales tax collections, but they're still really, really important and essential. Next slide. So as you guys can tell, I have dogs, and it has been an interesting afternoon for me, so I apologize for that.
We like it, Sarah.
The only thing missing is my baby crying, which I don't want to jinx it. So intergovernmental, those are dollars and revenue sources that come from other forms of government. So I kind of outlined federal government and state government. So on the federal government side, the county receives revenues from Forest Service in certain work that they do there. There is a special type of payment called PILT, which stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes. That's actually a formula based off of population and the percentage of the land within the county that is actually federally owned. So we do get on that one about just over $2.5 million on that. Other indirect cost, so whenever there is a federal grant that the county receives, they actually can charge an indirect cost, which is great. There's FEMA funds. There's also the Tailored Grazing Act. So there is land up on the Arizona Strip from this federal act that we do actually get we do receive money for. The bulk of that does go to our school districts in that area, but that is another source of federal government revenue. And of course, the Department of Education, that specifically goes to school districts, but at the county, actually, the juvenile courts do get a little bit of money from Department of Education for school lunch programs, other education programs, as they do provide a school for youth that are actually enrolled in the, or sorry, not enrolled, but are unfortunately in the juvenile detention facility. So, and then I was just gonna say very quickly, state government, those are monies that are actually coming down from the state. Elections is actually a big piece of that. So a lot of the money that actually comes in for elections does come from the state, and then also they do filter down from the feds. Wildland fires, that's mostly for our fire districts, different law enforcement, HERF funds, which is the highway user funds, and then other revenue sources for our judicial system and our courts. So the county also has charges for services, but also school districts and fire districts do as well. So those are services that they offer that they can actually provide per statute or legally a fee for. I don't like to use the word fee, which is why I say charges for services. But that's everything from Parks and Rec, Treasurer's Office, the Assessor's Office, school lunch, after school activities, public fiduciary. So there's a long list of that. Again, it's not a lot of money, but it is something, and they do go into the general fund. Next slide. So grants and special revenue. So these are awarded from a variety of different sources, and they don't have to come from a government. They can actually be awarded through a national company, such as, I'm trying to think of one locally, JP Morgan. They have actually given a grant to community services to do their IDA program. They can also get it from state organizations and also local organizations such as United Way. But they also would get grants and special revenue from federal, state, and local governments. So the thing to remember with grants and special revenue is the bulk of that money actually has to go towards a very specific purpose. So most of that money cannot be used in the county general fund, which means it can't be used towards paying for finance staff or IT staff or facility staff or the treasurer's office. And those are all really important and essential functions of the county. So that's where the county general fund revenues do come in, and grants and special revenue, we really don't get any piece of that unless they do allow for an indirect cost in that grant or special revenue. But even that indirect cost is not very significant. Next slide. And then there's a couple other miscellaneous funds, so fines and forfeitures. So those are fines that are collected by the justice courts and superior court. Those are all outlined in statute. Capital projects, that's mostly going to be parks and recs and facilities management to do things such as improvements on buildings. School districts can collect special revenues on things like updating their busing system, transportation. Then there's investments, which the treasurer's office manages the investment portfolio. So interest earned off of the investments do go back to the districts. And then there's also if they issue a bond. So Summit Fire District and Flagstaff Unified District out in the Doney Park area both have bonds. So we consider that other revenue, which is their actual revenue they collect from issuing the bonds. Schools can charge tuition fees, and they can also charge transportation fees for transporting their students across district lines in some cases. So a great example of that is out here in Belmont, actually, between Maine Unified School District, which is out in Parks, and Flagstaff Unified School District. Out in Belmont, we actually get to choose, and they have an agreement to help with transportation between the two of those. Next slide. So now comes what I like to say is the fun part in terms of just where the money is coming from. So now you hopefully have a really basic idea of the different sources of revenue within the county. So property taxes are probably one that most people and most residents in a community will recognize right away. Because if you're a property owner, whether it's your home, a mobile home, a business, you will get a property tax bill every year from us. So the breakdown, I actually pulled the numbers for the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area. So this actually gives you a breakdown as to where your money is going in your property tax bill. So almost 50% is going to education. So that broken down is about 47% goes to Flagstaff Unified School District. And I do want to say I actually put all of their types of property taxes that you would see on their line items in there. So that for FUSD includes their primary tax, which goes towards their operational cost. It includes their override, which was approved by the voters, I believe a few years ago was the last time. So that allows them to actually collect taxes above the statutory rate for their for that purpose of going towards operations. Then they also have a bond, so that's included in that percentage. And then for the last 2 years, you probably saw something called desegregation on your property tax bill. And what happened was about 2.5 years ago, the Arizona legislature passed that school districts who do have to collect money for desegregation must actually put that in a completely separate line item versus having it included in the primary operations line item for your property taxes. So it wasn't a new tax, it was just pulled out of the operational primary tax for FUSD and pulled into its own separate line item. And the reason why that FUSD has to do that is because in the 70s or 80s, there was actually a lawsuit in regards to there was inequity between schools located in the district. And as a result, the school district went into an agreement with the Federal Department of Education to make sure that there was equal revenue being distributed amongst all school districts. So really what was happening across the country, and I think all of us have heard of this, you know, unfortunately still happening today, is that schools located in wealthier neighborhoods would be receiving more money because the value of homes were higher than those who were located in not as affluent neighborhoods. And so that's what desegregation was essentially trying to address in the 70s and 80s. So that's really why that's going on. Summit Fire District out there is about 32%. That does include their bond that was passed a couple years ago. And then the remaining of it is CCC is about 4.2%, Coconino County 4.9%, that's for the general fund. That's 6.7 county special districts. That's going to be the library district, the flood control district, and the public health service district. And the other special districts are pretty much more statewide. So you have the state equalization tax, that goes towards education statewide. Then you have what's called FDAT, which is the Fire District Assistance Tax. And that actually helps, it goes through all of the fire districts within the county, and it actually allows, so for example, a Summit Fire District responds to an incident on I-40, there really isn't any way they can recover that cost, so FDAT helps recover those cases of emergencies that are not really residential. And then the last one is JTED Caveat, which is a technical district for juniors and seniors here in our county. And I do want to point out that actually Arizona has some of the lowest property taxes in the country. So we are actually 36th in the country in terms of our average property taxes for tax year 2019, which we are just coming off of. Next slide. So this one is of the entire Coconino County budget. And actually, we just adopted our budget a couple weeks ago, so I was actually able to pull the numbers for FY21. And I did want to point out that only about 41% of the entire county budget is actually the general fund. So the bulk of, so over 50% of the funds that the county does receive are actually pretty much allocated and already accounted for, because they do have to be spent on certain services that are provided based off of grant and that special revenue. So again, you can kind of see the makeup here. Property tax is only about 15% of the entire overall county budget. Sales taxes is the most significant, which is 23%. And so if you think about it, when we are in the middle of a recession, such as right now with a pandemic, that sales tax number is going to decrease. But as you can see, it's a big piece of the pie. So losing sales tax revenue is very significant to the county and does have, unfortunately, negative impacts. And that's something that we always look for in terms of recession is where are sales tax numbers. Property taxes, we know there's a lag because of the way property taxes work. So for tax year 2020, we are going to bill in September. So we're in fiscal year 21. The values for tax year 2020 were set in 2019 in about February 2019. So in FY21, you're actually collecting property taxes on values from 2019. So there is a lag. So whenever there is a recession, it does eventually fall, and on the county side, it's not as impactful as that immediate sales tax revenue shortage. Next slide. So this is the budget for Summit Fire District, who also just recently passed their budget, I think maybe a week ago. So you can see the difference here where the fire district, almost 75% of their entire budget comes from property tax collections. And this is very consistent with districts outside of, honestly, cities and counties. They're very limited as to what they can actually receive revenues from. So they actually don't get any part of the sales tax. Schools don't get any revenue from sales tax. And so really property taxes is the bulk, which is why on your tax bill, those numbers are higher compared to, for example, the county and even the city, if you are in city limits, who do have these other options such as sales tax to be able to make up revenue. So about 10% of their budget comes from grants. This mostly, I know for Summit Fire, comes from federal grants. For example, FEMA, right now for providing emergency services. They also receive money from to do wildland fire education and fire prevention programs. The wildland income is actually money that they get from working on a fire located outside of their area. So anytime you hear there's a fire like in California and Summit Fire District has sent a couple guys over there, they actually will get reimbursed by the state of California for wildland services. FDAT is that fire district assistance tax. And then miscellaneous income that they may receive from different things here and there that may come up. Next slide. So, big question is, great, how do I actually find this on my own if I'm, I want to know more? So, great example, I put the county website on here, but any taxing district, if you go to their website and on the search bar, just type in budget or financials, all government entities have to post their budget on their website. They also have to post their audits and financial statements on there. Excuse me. So you can go, for example, county website. You can type in Coconino County budget. It will take you to a link. It was really long to fit on here. But on there, you will actually see all of their financial statements and the budget. Same with Summit Fire District. They will actually even post a copy of when like a summary from their board on their budget. I know Summit Fire District does. And then FUSD does have a link to a separate website managed by the state where all school district budgets are located on and financial statements. So another thing to always look at when you're talking about government finances, all of us have to get our books audited every single year. So the Auditor General actually audits all of the county all counties in Arizona, so Coconino County. And they also do a lot of the school districts. They do the community colleges and a couple other districts. So I would highly recommend going to their website. It's pretty easy. You go to azauditor.gov. When you're on there, you can actually see on the top, search by entity, and it breaks it down: school district, county, city, etc. I know City of Flagstaff is not on there, but you can find City of Flagstaff financials on their website. And the final good resource is Open Books AZ, which is managed by the Arizona Department of Administration. So government entities are actually required every year to report information on any outstanding debt that they have. So that's bonds, any weird loans for like equipment, anything that's outstanding that's a debt, government entities have to report. And if, let's say, they took out a bond in 1980, if they're still paying it off, that will show up on that report. It's very, very detailed. It has a lot of information. It tells you what the interest rate is that they're paying on, how much they've paid in interest total, how much is pending, etc. So if you're ever interested in knowing more, hey, you know, how much debt does the county have, or how much debt does FUSD or City of Flagstaff have, openbooks.az.gov is the place to go. Next slide. And so a little bit in what I do, I focus a lot on investments for the county. So I am a certified government investment professional. It's a unique designation. I believe I'm definitely the only treasurer in Arizona that has it. I believe I'm the only government official in Arizona who actually holds that designation. And so I'm highly involved in our investment portfolio. And I wanted to put this out there because kind of following the markets, it really does help guide overall for our districts what's to come in terms of revenues for the upcoming fiscal year. So I did this by calendar year. So the yellow line was 2019, and we follow the 2-year, or this is a 5-year treasury, sorry. And the reason why 5-year treasury is because we can't invest in anything past 5 years. And it's actually a really good tool. But back in March, what was interesting and very unfortunate was the 10-year treasury fell below 1%. That has never happened in the history of the United States. And so we are in really, really, we're just in a really interesting, I don't want to, situation right now. It's not like anything we've ever seen economically. And so you could see the pink is actually of 2020. And so January, you know, we were about where we were in December. February went down a little, but you can see that huge drop from February to March. And it's just been going down since. Now the July through December, I actually just kept it steady from the June numbers. But what we're already seeing in July is this isn't going to be going up. And so this has been really telling as our districts and the counties start working on their budgets and start looking at the upcoming fiscal year and honestly the next 2 fiscal years. And so I actually have been doing weekly meetings with all the taxing districts and sharing them a lot of data and analysis that we're doing to kind of help figure out what are our budgets going to look like, because they're going to go down. And it's only going to get worse, and the data is there. And so how can we get through this together? So that I just like to always, whenever I do these presentations, really point out, especially the last couple months, just this is what the situation is right now. So you can see that right now, even what governments rely on for sources of income, it's going to be hard hit, and this is going to be an issue across the entire country, not just in Coconino County. Next slide. Oh, well, that is the end of what I have. Does anyone have any questions for me? And my contact information is on there if you ever wanted to ask me more information or anything like that.
I have a couple of questions. Sarah.
Yeah.
Really impressed with your
We can't hear you that
credentials.
well.
Very
It
echoey.
was a great presentation. I need to hear all of it because of my computer problems, but it was
Bernice, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Maybe just, yeah, that sounded better. Maybe just speak right into the mic.
I'll type my question.
We can hear that. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, okay. I want to know, okay, first of all, I'd like to know if we get medical marijuana initiative, and also if we get much revenue from the casino that is significant.
So the casino revenues are actually kept by the tribe. So the Navajo Nation actually does keep those revenues. Now, there is something on there that they do have to invest a portion of that back into the local community. A lot of the times they do that more towards via grants to different programs. So if we receive anything from the casino, it would be seen more like a grant than anything else. And then in terms of the medical marijuana initiative, the only tax we receive right now from that is business personal property. And if they own the physical building, the real property. So business personal property is more things like equipment, you know, furniture, fleets of cars, etc. I do know that in the last couple years, it has been very difficult to figure out how to tax that business personal property for medical marijuana facilities. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of talk with the Arizona Department of Revenue on that, and what does that look like? In terms of any sales tax around that one I don't know for sure, but I do know that the business personal property with the medical marijuana facilities is probably the most direct type of revenue that we do see tied to that industry.
Are there any other questions for Sarah?
Yes, I had a couple.
Who's that?
Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes.
It's Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Yeah, I didn't think of, hello. My question to you is, I think you already answered it, because I was reading there was like 1/3 talking about property taxes, 1/3 that are not without paying property taxes till later. So that wouldn't really affect 2020. That's going to be affecting 2021. But you've already said everything's tight. I mean, the graph shows it just goes zoop, all the way down for funding for projects. So, you know, I guess that answered that one. But I had some questions just about others. So am I right on that? It's going to affect us later on, but everything is kind of zipping down the drain, correct?
Say that one more time.
You kind of mentioned that what we are collecting, since there's a lag, and because 1/3 are not paying their property taxes, they're allowed not to pay it now. And so it would really affect us later down the line. But then the funds that came from property taxes, because you said of that lag, that is going to other funds now because of the COVID. So it's going to not go where it's supposed to be going anyway, where the funds were supposed to be directed to?
Sort of. So actually, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on this. So actually our property tax collections have been up. It's just there's a—
Oh, it has? Good. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, we only saw a very, very small dip in property tax collections.
Perfect. Good.
However, we are anticipating that may not be the case for tax year 2020, which is FY21.
Okay.
And yeah, we're doing a lot of analysis on that right now with some national groups, because we're actually seeing a shortfall with commercial properties, and that's our biggest concern is, will commercial properties, will companies be able to pay property taxes? And I know I've had conversations even back in May where it was, I have to decide, do I pay this property tax or do I pay my employees? And we're going to probably continue seeing that in the next fiscal year. So, but you do bring up an interesting point, and a great example of that, I'm going to pull out the fire districts. The fire districts did have to spend money across the country on getting PPE, because about 97% of all first responders in the country are actually firemen. So when you 911, it's usually the fire department that actually is there with their ambulance. And so they have to treat every single 911 call as if they were COVID positive. And unfortunately, yes, and then unfortunately with the CARES Act money that went through, there is no federal definition of a special district. So fire districts were not eligible to receive any money from the CARES Act revenues that have already gone through.
Okay.
So in Arizona, none of the fire districts actually were able to recover those funds, which means where are they going to have to come up with that money? From property taxes, which means that they're going to be cutting other areas to recover those costs. Unless there is, I know that there is a bill in Congress right now that would actually put a definition for special districts and includes fire districts and would allow them to collect that on future revenues, but it's still going to have an impact going forward. And we don't know if that's going to pass or not. But no, you're right. If you have a certain pot of money for general fund, and in this case, it's only about 42%, for example, the county. And that means, you know, you've got about 50-ish% for special that you can't move to address, you know, things of this nature that come up.
Right.
Then that means that you do have to cut your general fund side of house, which already is tight as it is and will continue to get tighter. So that's why really when, you know, federal relief comes out right now, for example, during COVID, it's so essential that our government, our local government agencies are able to recover costs from there. Because if not, that means that their only other option is to tap into general fund money, which is shrinking, especially on the sales tax side of house. And that means services are going to be reduced. So and that's where it's such a complex topic. And it's not, I hopefully don't offend anyone this way, but it's not a very sexy topic. And so it doesn't get a lot of attention and a lot of people don't want to go into it, but it's so important and essential. So I view my role as treasurer to make sure I'm helping all of our taxing districts, one, understand this is where you collect your money from. You might budget for this, but this is truly the reality in terms of cash today.
Right.
What's in the next year? And that's what we're working on right now.
And I just wanted to interject here and say, you know, one of the reasons why we wanted Sarah to make this presentation is to really understand and clear up or establish any expectations that the committee might have in terms of funding for area plan needs. For instance, once we start getting into the goals and policies and coming up with an implementation plan, the implementation plan may well have projects on it that, as we can see from the slide, don't necessarily have funding to back them up.
Correct.
And I think that was one thing that we're getting a very clear message on right now. You know, there might be other strategies if the committee wants to form some sort of group after the area plan is done to apply for different grants for special projects, things like that. You know, that's going to require another conversation at a later time. But, you know, that is one of the real messages that we wanted to convey here is that, you know, we've got staff time. We're going to put together the plan. We'll work with you all to you know, put together the most realistic plan that we can, realizing, you know, as happened with the Belmont area plan, there's some implementation items that may or may not ever get off the ground unless there is other funding. There are other funding sources, you know, that can be tapped into. So I just wanted to kind of, you know, bring that back to our project here in the sense that yeah, funding is very complex. And Sarah, thank you so much for making a complex topic understandable to at least most of it. I think I've grasped about 50% of what you said, so I know how to get in touch with you now.
So, Sarah, I have a quick question.
I've got 3 more questions. Okay, go ahead.
Liz,
Brian.
and
I have questions too.
this is Melissa. So I do want to keep tabs on time. It's just 6 o'clock now, and we have another very interesting presentation. So if we could move on to the questions, and then we'll.
So then the questions that we just addressed to her then specifically with an email, because there are 3 big ones.
Go ahead, Liz. But it's just, yeah, let's just try to keep our mind on the time.
Correct. So do you want me to go real quick, or do you want me to email her the questions? Okay. The quick questions were this. Is there a chart somewhere, Sarah, that you have that we can actually divide up specific taxes to specific funds? Like you said, particularly in this one slide, you said the Taylor Green and the US something education, it all goes to FUSD. And then the other ones, we didn't go into details about these certain taxes go to these certain projects, because that kind of goes into part is if we want grants for certain projects, is there a chart there when you say grants, do we as a group or separate groups go out that grant, or do we have to get them voted in to even attempt to get that grant, let's say for transportation or for another part out here? Is there something in your website that will say specifically what money goes to what funds? Like you did with the FUSD, it was the Taylor, I can't read my own writing. The Taylor
Raising Act monies go to FUSD. You know, it's not a pretty graph, but in their budget, the county budget, they actually do have a breakdown as to how much amounts go into each department. It's not just, it's not specific by what kind of grant, unfortunately. And so, you know, Taylor grazing, for example, actually our office is highly involved in working with the feds on that. So I know that one really well. But some of these other dollars, I see the cash and how much comes in, but I couldn't tell you this is tied to this specific grant. I just know, you know, juvenile court got a grant from, you know, Department of Education, and juvenile court I know a little better because we're more involved. I know the school stuff really well in terms of the types of grants, because those are limited. But
so grants don't have to be voted in. They could just can be a special service project, and they write their own grants. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we're not going to get involved in grants. So I'm wondering if we can move on.
Okay, we'll pass on. Then can I just ask you, marriage licensing, that was another question. Marriage licensing, if you get married in Flagstaff, some of that money goes to county? That was one of the yes, okay. Okay, and utilities, I got that, okay. And then chart, we already said there is a chart, but I'll have to contact you separately. Okay, that was it. I just want to understand where my money's going, and as a committee, do we have any charge of this money, or is it just, you know?
We have no control over it.
Right.
It's already been budgeted, and we're not going to be able to change that budget. What we can do is recommend certain projects to be funded in the future.
But I didn't want to waste our time recommending that if we have no power in it anyway, because we have no money. So I was just trying to save the committee time and effort. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question about the property tax. Does the county know what percentage of the properties in Coconino County and the unincorporated areas are rentals?
I can find that out for you. I know the assessor has been working on getting that data. And so it would be a cross-reference between my office and theirs, but I can get back to you with that. I can get that information to Melissa.
Thank you.
That would be interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Was there anybody else that had a question? And if so, we need to make it very quick. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sarah, and I really appreciate it. We'll be in touch later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome to stay with us for the rest of the evening.
Oh, for a fun time, right?
So, could we move on to Sarah Dector?
Yes. Hang on a second.
So for the rest of the committee, Sarah Dector is the planning manager, comprehensive planning manager for the city of Flagstaff. And you say, well, wait a minute, we're not in the city of Flagstaff, but how many of us work in Flagstaff? How many of us go there to do our shopping or whatever? So knowing what's happening in the city, excuse me, I think is really crucial to understanding how we interface here in Doney Park, Fernwood, Timberline. And so, Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So I'll introduce myself a little more. I'm Sarah Dector. I have worked for the city of Flagstaff for the last 5 years. Before that, I had 10 years of federal employment with the U.S. Forest Service. I worked for 3 different national forests and in the Washington office over the 10 years I was with them. My last 4 years were at the Coconino National Forest, so my familiarity with Doney, Timberline, and Fernwood is on the other side of the property line. But I am presenting tonight some information about the Flagstaff Regional Plan. As you know, Doney, Timberline, and Fernwood are part of the greater Flagstaff area, and you fall, as David Wessel told you at a previous meeting, within the Flagstaff MPO. So this document that you see here on the slide is the cover of our Flagstaff Regional Plan. It's called a regional plan because for the city of Flagstaff, it's our general plan, which is our highest level plan. But for, could you go to the next slide, Melissa? But for the county, this is their area plan that is a kind of a higher level area plan than what you're developing with Melissa now. And it offers some really broad brushes on 3 overarching topics. The first one is the natural environment. So it contains maps and information about environmental protection and environmental restoration in the Flagstaff and surrounding areas. It contains information about desired outcomes for the built environment and maps that also implement that. And it also talks about the human environment. It talks about economic development. It talks about neighborhoods, and it talks about public services and facilities. Next slide, please. So what I would like to point out about our regional plan is that it has a very comprehensive approach to natural resources. It uses data from the Forest Service, from the county, from the Museum of Northern Arizona, and NAU and many other sources to take as comprehensive a look as it can at the regional scale natural resource issues. So there's a lot of information in this presentation that'll help enlighten, and maybe you've already had a little bit of this information about what we know at this 10,000 foot level about the Doney Park, Fernwood, and Timberline areas. Next slide, please. It also has a place-based approach. And what we mean by that is that we are trying to create through this plan as a community and as a county, an integrated set of land uses that meet the character goals and the sustainability goals of our community. And this is why I think when you see some of the development controversies in the city of Flagstaff, they're often about density. Now, this area of the county does not have a very high goals in terms of density. And part of the reason Flagstaff centrally has higher density goals is to protect those natural resources in the outlying areas and make sure that we are preserving some of those natural resources that we'll talk about. Next, please. Another key element of this plan is that it had a very citizen-driven approach. There was a citizens advisory committee, many charrettes and meetings with both partners and all throughout the surrounding area for the city and county. And so there was not just planners sitting around a table drawing things. This was very often members of the community leaning over a table and giving their insights and input that ultimately balanced all these trade-offs that we need to look at a regional level for both water, transportation, and land use. Next slide, please. So as I said, this is an area plan for the county. So when Melissa, I should say, was doing the Belmont area plan, we were talking about the Flagstaff regional plan there too. That also falls within the MPO area. But it falls, if you could go to the next slide, Melissa, it falls under the county's comprehensive plan. And this is kind of a little chart that we use. I call it the planning pyramid. It's also my favorite slide in the world because I put it in every presentation. And it talks about how for the city, the regional plan is really the top level of our organization. But for the county, it's sort of different. Coconino County has this comprehensive plan that is at that level. And then the regional plan actually fits between the Coconino County comprehensive plan and the specific plans that you are doing, these area plans. Next slide. So let's start by talking about the built environment. This is what we call the future growth illustration from the regional plan. And the tan color you see over the areas that have been already developed in Coconino County is what we call a rural area and place type. You'll also see on this map that there are some circles and dots. Those are the activity centers. And so activity centers are identified as places where small commercial and civic uses are appropriate in a rural landscape. And the rural area type is very low density, usually less than 1 unit per acre, or pretty large lots, primarily made of homes, accessory dwelling units or guest houses, barns, cottage industries, and other home-based businesses. Now the nearby land uses that you'll see on this map are the green in the map in the bottom right, or in the bottom left corner is Picture Canyon. That's a city-owned open space. And then there's the employment area that you often see around Dodge and where the mine is for cinders on Sheep Hill. And then there's also a suburban corridor that runs along the US 180 highway within the city limits. Next slide, please.
Sarah, if I could just mention too that the boundary is between the city and the county is where the color line begins.
Yes, that's important. There's the red city limit line, but then you'll also see kind of between the blue and the green a dashed line. That's actually our urban growth boundary for the city of Flagstaff. And the way Flagstaff uses the urban growth boundary is if you live within that boundary and you come to the City of Water Services and you request a water meter and you want to hook up to city water, we will work with the folks who are inside that boundary. We've already analyzed the impacts of including them in our water system for our, what we call our 100-year water supply. The City of Flagstaff voluntarily submits audited information to the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality to verify that we have a supply of water that can meet our growth and development needs for 100 years. That's part of why Red Gap Ranch is a water source that the city is pursuing, is because that's part of the water rights that we own as a city and that we can use within our urban growth boundary. So when we get requests to provide water outside of that area, Rain Valley is a really good example, we would require the property owner to do their own analysis of how their request would affect the overall city system and whether or not it would basically be taking water from some other future user or fits within our balance for that 100-year water supply. And so that's why we have an urban growth boundary. We don't use it to say you can't develop past this boundary, but we use it in terms of analysis for our water services division. Next slide. So for the rural areas, there's really just this one goal and policy that applies from the county. And so if you can, Melissa can provide these to you all, but these are the broad goals for rural areas, which is really to maintain the rural character of these existing communities like Doney Park, Fernwood, and Timberline. It requires that we look at the comprehensive plan, that the neighborhoods are designed for public access to the national forest, that we're preserving our resources, and that we are working with designs appropriate to the community that we are planning for. So none of these are super specific in terms of your community, but they are kind of the guideposts. If you're looking at what your plan should accomplish in terms of the built environment, these are the guideposts that we put in place for rural communities to work on their area plans. Next slide, please. So trails planning. This is our trails map from the regional plan. And as you can see, it sort of stops at the city limits a little bit. I mean, it has the Arizona Trail, has the Flagstaff Loop Trail. That's the blue one that you see in the corner. And it has a couple trailheads identified for this area. However, when we are finished with the regional plan, we don't stop planning for these resources. We actually keep going. And so we have been working the city, the county, and a large group of partners on the Flagstaff Trails Initiative for the last 3 years. Can you hit the next button, please, Melissa? And so that plan on a region-wide basis has become even more refined. You can see the same trails that you saw in the regional plan map. We can also see there's a few more interesting trails. This map includes all the Forest Service trails that are official in the surrounding area for Doney Park. And of course, the Doney Park, Timberline, and Fernwood plan can expand or refine these further as part of your process. Next slide. This area of the county is actually very rich in natural resources. I can show the little zoom in of our significant natural resources map to many communities, and you'll see a little splotch of something here and a splotch of something there. But pretty much most of this area has some significant natural resources. Now on this map, the hatched area is areas that are known to support prairie dog colonies. Prairie dog colonies are important ecologically because they can support black-footed ferret populations, which is a threatened species that's been reintroduced on the Babbitt Ranch north of this area. So right now there's a bunch of little ferrets that kind of live up on the Babbitt Ranch, and their food source is, of course, prairie dogs. It could be within 10 or 15 years, they start moving south into this area if the habitat conditions are right and the population is growing. So that is why we identify areas of prairie dog colonies. They're not very ecologically unique on their own like they are in Utah, but they serve this habitat function as being an area where there's food and resources for a more threatened species. The other colors, the yellow, the orange, and the kind of maroon color are all areas with rare soil types. And the reason those are highlighted, cinder and basalt soils, there's also some limestone soils, and the Penstemon and clutii habitat are because there are rare and threatened plants that can exist in those habitats. And some of those areas I know have been surveyed and those plants have been found, and other ones, it's just a potential that if seeds fell and the conditions were right, we could see an expansion of these rare plants. You can also see in the green a riparian area that runs south of this area. Oh, and I'm sorry, and it's actually the lavender color in the upper right-hand corner that is the Penstemon clutii habitat. And that is a rare penstemon. It's often called the cinder penstemon. And it's unique to northern Arizona. It only occurs within this like biodiversity island around the San Francisco peaks. Next slide, please. Another unique emphasis in the plan is that we took, I think Melissa told me that Peter Pillis came and did a presentation for you all on cultural resources. Well, this map, we took all of the data on the entire Coconino National Forest, or actually I should say Chris Barrett, who worked for Peter Pillis at the time, took all that data and created a density map based on soil type, vegetation, and slope. So he took all the findings in the Sinawa Paleo-Indian period and said, well, if I am looking for places that are going to have a high or a low likelihood of having a cultural resource, an archaeological resource, where would I go? Now, because of the National Historic Preservation Act, we cannot put cultural resources like ARC sites or kivas on the map here and show it publicly because those are that's protected information. But this density map shows us where the high likelihood, it's the darkest color, that red color, is the highest likelihood that you would find an archaeological resource in that location. And then the lighter yellow color is where there's a lower probability, essentially. And so we use this map to sort of make determinations about where archaeological surveys are important and why, if we were looking at an area in the city. And there's not a cultural resource ordinance in the county, but this is something you can consider in your plan, is how you would like to protect and preserve these resources, both known and unknown. And I'm sure there are some unknown ones out there on private land or on the forest. We want to, you know, as a community, we want to see those protected. Next slide, please. And so that's my very fast clip notes on how the regional plan discusses this area of the county and how it relates to the city of Flagstaff. I'd be glad to entertain any questions that I can answer.
Sarah, this is Rob Wilson. I'm curious, for the city, the voters have to actually approve this plan via a vote. And in the county, is it true that the county supervisors on their own just adopt this without that citizen input?
Yes, well, I wouldn't say it's without citizen input. They had a pretty hefty public hearing, but they use the same process in the county that they will use to adopt your plan. Where in the city we have to send it to the ballot and have a direct vote on it.
Okay, and this is a federal government mandate that we have this plan, both at the county and the city level, is that correct?
No, it's a requirement of the state of Arizona. In the early 2000s, they passed a Growing Smarter legislation. And so we meet the requirements. There's different requirements for the county and the city. They're sort of blended in this document, but it's a different state level code. It's for cities, it's in Title IX, I think, of the Arizona Revised Statute. Melissa, I don't know where you find that information.
It's Chapter 11, Title 11 for counties. And I think what's interesting to note as well is the Growing Smarter Act specifically distinguished between the city and then the county processes. And so cities and towns are subject to submitting their general plan, or in this case, it's a regional plan, to the voters as a referendum for approval. The counties are not subject to that same rule. And this is interesting, though, in that the county has adopted the Flagstaff Regional Plan for the portion that covers the county, although that portion was adopted not by referendum. It was adopted, as Sarah mentioned, through the public process that will be the same for adopting this area plan. It will go to the Planning and Zoning Commission for recommendation to then the Board of Supervisors, all at public hearings. So it's an interesting difference in the processes between the municipal entities, and the fact that this is called a regional plan. You can also think of it as a city general plan. It just covers a broader area. So it is a bit of a hybrid in that sense.
Okay, and either Melissa or whoever, this too is not a ordinance or an enforceable type document, the regional plan, like our area plan. Is that correct?
Well, that's an excellent question, and to get back to what Sarah was explaining, it is similar to an area plan in that there is a hierarchy in county planning documents. The comprehensive plan, our comprehensive plan, being the equivalent of the regional plan to the city. So the comprehensive plan is the #1 planning document to the county. The regional plan is the city's #1 planning document. Everything else falls under that. So for the county, then the regional plan falls under the comprehensive plan, and the area plans fall under it as well. When we have a rezoning decision or a subdivision request or a conditional use permit, we review the goals and policies in all of these documents, the comprehensive plan, if it's an area that's covered by the regional plan or an area plan, we review the policies to determine whether or not the project meets the intent of those policies. So it's not an ordinance. There is some discretionary approval in that process.
Thank you.
This is a very important distinction to understand, though, because there are area plans within the county that are not covered by the regional plan. So, for instance, Valley. You know, there are other places. We have 9 area plans in the county, and I don't know off the top of my head how many, but the furthest reaches east and west are Belmont on the west side, and then Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood on the east side. And again, it's kind of a square, or rather a rectangle, around the Flagstaff area, following the FMPO, the Flagstaff Municipal Planning Organization, the transportation planning boundary. So that's the nexus there.
And within that area, when this was being developed, they actually modeled land use, transportation, and water all together. So, and we actually did climate change indicators as well. So we sort of, as they were kind of thinking about how the city and the county might grow together, because really people in the county, as you said earlier, move in, they come in and out of the city for their shopping, for their jobs, for, you know, childcare, many of those services. You know, they really thought, like, how are we going to manage demand for our roads? Who's going to be able to pay for these improvements? How are we going to manage our water balance with this population growth? So it wasn't just an exercise in kind of visioning the prettiest place that we could imagine. It's actually an exercise in how we functionally can achieve a sustainable place that can support all of the economic and social amenities that our citizens want.
I have a question. Melissa, I believe it's probably more for you than it is for Sarah. But when you look at the cultural resource sensitivity on there, we live in a pretty, personally, we live in a pretty sensitive area, part of Doney Park there. And so how is that going to affect our particular area plan in terms of what we make recommendations for?
That's a great question, Dave. And I just want to go back to something Sarah mentioned. And there is a difference between the city and county ordinances. The city does have an ordinance that directs people to protect certain cultural resources, particularly historic buildings in the downtown historic district. The county does not have a similar ordinance. In other words, our zoning ordinance does not have rules around protecting potentially or buildings that are actually designated as historic resources. We do have policies in the comprehensive plan that would guide that. And an area plan then can mimic those, can back those up in terms of what would happen when a discretionary process, excuse me, I'm going to manage somebody, okay. Where there's a discretionary approval, such as we said, a rezoning, a subdivision, a conditional use permit. So that's when either the Planning Commission and or the Board of Supervisors would have the ability to request or require something above and beyond what the zoning ordinance might during the approval process. So yeah, it's different in the city and the county. There are a lot of resources here, so the area plan can address those and then have strong policies in there to encourage protection when we have such a project.
So we can't designate Horstman's as a historic resource.
Who's talking? Oh, is that Rob?
Sorry.
So it's interesting about Horstman's. I do not know the age of that building, but just looking at it, I would think that it might have potential. It hasn't been surveyed. It hasn't been analyzed to my knowledge, although the new owners might have done something like that.
I was just
okay.
I'd like to follow up a little bit then. Would it be, for example, would it be useful for us to put in our area plan some at least parts of where we see cultural resources that are sensitivity that are in the dark there, that needs to be at least advised that that needs to be considered during the approval process on up the line.
That's definitely something that the committee consider recommending as a policy. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
That's a great question, Dave, and I think it's something that we need to look at closely, and we might even go back to Peter Pillis and ask him again, where are the sites that we should be aware of not to advertise them, but rather to have some protection for them.
We also have a bunch of the old Mormon bean canning sheds here and there. There's a couple of them out there, I believe, if that matters to anybody.
Well, they're definitely 100 years old, so they fall under the Antiquities Act.
Well, I don't think the one on my property is 100, but it's definitely part of the cultural progression of our area.
Sure.
One thing that the city's ordinance does for historic preservation that's unique in northern Arizona, really in Arizona, we're the only ones that do this, but we have what we call cultural resource study requirements. So if you're redeveloping land, let's say you're building even a new single family home, we have you get a professional archaeologist to survey your property. Now, we can't keep you from, if you find a kiva on your property and you want to fill it in, we're not going to stop you from doing that, but at least then we get documentation, and there's a statewide database of archaeological sites called AsSite, and that allows us to keep the records that these artifacts or places existed, which can be really useful to researchers about the whole pattern of settlement in pre-pioneer era Arizona. And so we just try and make sure that that's communicated and saved and put in there. So we have this sort of, if you can't save a building and we can't convince you about the importance of a structure or a site on your property, we at least have gotten the information and done some recovery, even if it's not full recovery of artifacts, to allow that knowledge of archaeological resources in the state to grow and not lose information, which is really, I think, what we hear from archaeologists is their biggest complaint, is that when we lose the information, they don't know what's missing, and so they're stuck trying to create scenarios based on information that has holes in it. That's just my 2 cents. It's very unique, and it doesn't, whatever you pick up doesn't just have to be about preserving a building. It could also be about records and creating history documentation for Doney Park, Fernwood, and Timberline. Those are other approaches that you can use for historic preservation work.
And again, that's a good distinction because the area plan would not be able to apply a rule, for instance, to a new single family residence. We could encourage that, but there's not a discretionary approval process that would then move through. So in other words, to build a new home, if there are current entitlements on a property, then a property owner can just submit a building permit. And there's really not another process that they would have to go through to identify cultural sites. It's different for those other types of projects that need a board approval or a commission approval. So we'll talk more about this, but you know, that is a pretty important difference between the city ordinance and then the county's ordinance.
Thanks for laying that out, because I think it's going to be important for us to understand how our plan fits into the larger comprehensive plan of the county. And I'm seeing some differences here that I didn't understand previously.
And keep in mind too that in terms of identifying specific sites, that's not something that we would want to or even be able to identify on maps. You know, those are often sensitive resources that if there is information, those are usually kept, they are not public information. And so in terms of the level of detail that our plan can identify, it would be on a much more general level, something like this map or something similar to what Peter had presented to us in his presentation. But we'll talk in much more detail about that type of policy in a few months.
Does anybody else have questions for Sarah? I don't hear any.
Just like to thank her for her time this evening.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming, Sarah. It's important for us to have this interconnected vision, if you will.
Absolutely, and Melissa knows where I am if you have any questions about adjacent city land and how it's being planned for. We can always coordinate. Thank you so much.
wasn't I supposed to introduce something about you?
Oh yeah, you're supposed to say that. So Sarah Benatar introduced herself as a Wolverine, and as one of the Fighting Irish, I would like to say that I'm the not Wolverine Sarah.
Go blue.
Yeah, go Irish.
Thank
Did
you,
you go to
Sarah.
Notre Dame?
Yes, I went to
Okay.
Notre Dame, so I always tease her when we're on calls or meetings together. I was like, yeah, but Michigan's terrible. I still give her a really hard time, but she got off the phone too fast.
Well, you'll have to catch up with her. And I have to say, go Hokies. So anyone who knows Virginia Tech, there you go.
We're playing for football this year.
Yeah. Sarah, thanks so much. And so if anyone has follow-up questions, Sarah and I are in touch quite frequently, so we can certainly get back to you on anything. But this is really good background information to what we'll be doing next.
Right.
All right,
Do we
Sarah.
want to take a short break and then come back and begin looking at policy?
I think a break would be great. 5 minutes?
Is 5 minutes enough for everyone? And if so, let's be back at 6:40.
Thanks, Sarah. See you later.
Thank you again, Sarah.
Melissa, this is Jim Clifford.
Hi, Jim.
Will you be sending us out these presentations also?
Yes, I have been posting them on our planning
Right.
webpage, but we can send them as well if you'd rather have an email.
That's okay. I can get it off of the page. I just wanted to make sure that they made it there.
Yes, every presentation and the meeting notes are posted up there.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have 6:40 on my watch. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we're good.
All righty. Are we missing folks?
Well, everybody's screen is still up, but they're slowly coming back on the camera.
So for this next section, Rob, Melissa, and I have been chatting a bit or emailing, and we want to begin to capture key presentation points first from tonight, and then we want to begin looking at what it is that where we're going to be going after this, because this is essentially the last of our information meetings. So who has comments on, you want to start with Sarah Benatar's presentation? Comments from folks? I'm not hearing anybody.
Hi, Brian. I think one thing that I picked up out of it was the way that the money comes in. A lot of people have the misconception that the only funds that come into the county are property taxes. And she went in more depth with the federal funds that come in, city funds that come in if we go to city, different things like that. So I think what she showed us as the whole picture really opened up my eyes also to where this is coming from. I knew we got money from sales taxes and things like that, but she went into the other taxes, and that's not always brought out in meetings like this. So that's one key point that we need to keep in mind, that as we go through this, it's not just focused on property taxes.
Good point. Was that Jim Clifford?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Jim. The other thing that I would mention along the same line is that taxes are always collected in arrears. In other words, we're paying, this year we paid for 2019 taxes. The tax bill that we get in October or November is going to be for 2020 taxes, and we end up paying them in 2021. So we're always behind on the collection of the taxes. Does that make sense to folks? One of my questions that I thought of afterwards is whether or not there's any cushion in the budget. In other words, is there any, it's 130 million, that's the total. And what's the cushion in terms of if expenses go way up for roads or for firefighting or whatever is the next thing that we've got to put more money into? Melissa, do you have any idea whether or not there is a cushion in the budget?
I have heard that there is some cushion built in. And for instance, I know that, this year, when everything started changing in March, there was talk about some revenue savings and different ways to do that. but I can get back with Sarah Benatar and ask her if you need more information on that. But I don't know that that's specifically relevant to our process.
I don't think it is.
Yeah, it's just, so I do believe there is some, but I can get the particulars if you need that.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Other comments, concerns?
Yeah.
Cameron?
Yeah, so as far as her biggest point or what she was stressing was that sales tax was their biggest stream of revenue, where everything came from. So the allotment of sales tax, is that distributed upon what's in the city and what's in the county, or is it spread upon both city and county, no matter where the sales are located?
That's a good question. I didn't pick up on where that was then allocated.
Yeah.
My understanding, go ahead.
My understanding is that there is the statewide sales tax that everyone pays. On top of that, the county allocates another additional, I think, 1-point-something%, which brings us to that 6.9% county sales tax rate. And the county collects that portion. The city, instead of that 1-point-whatever%, adds an additional percent. And the 1-point-whatever% is incorporated in the city tax rate because they are part of the county.
That's my understanding as well. But the county only gets 1.5% of a sale, whether city or county.
Well, see, excuse me, gentlemen, I have a question. That's one of my questions I was going to ask her, but I know we had to hold our questions. Is I wrote down sales tax 1.3, county 5.6%, and that's what I was going to ask her. Do we get them both? Is that divided? I didn't know because she did have that on her chart.
That's what makes up the 6.9% sales tax rate.
Both of them. So it's a 1.3 is the county and the 5.6 is the, okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Thanks, Rob.
Other questions, other comments?
Dave, did you have a question?
I think it's really important to find. Can you hear me?
Hold on. I think Dave had a question.
No, I was just going to comment. I'm not quite sure how this works into our area plan document. It's, it may be something we might want to think about some of the special things, but we're already going to cover, places where growth might impact the fire department, for example, and and other facilities, and like that. So, but I don't see how this is actually particularly relevant to what we're doing.
I'm just trying to figure out where the allotment is. So if we don't have a lot of commercial producing sales tax, and we're still seeing the sales tax from the city, and it doesn't matter whether the sales tax is coming from us or coming from them. So that's why it has to do with how we develop it if we have things that are producing sales tax or aren't in the county.
Well, Cameron, my understanding would be if there was more commercial development in Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood, then that would go to the county. The taxes collected from those businesses would go to the county.
Right, that's what I believed, and so that's why I was concerned with how it developed, because her point was that that's where most of the revenue is coming from, as far as development. So, okay,
that's correct.
Yep.
Any other questions on that?
I think it's important to find out how many rentals there are in the county, as well as Airbnbs and people using their properties for commercial use, such as the Airbnbs, and seeing if they're going to be using it for a business, if they should be taxed at a different rate than a single family dwelling with one family.
I'll follow up with Sarah on that.
That's a good point.
Melissa, is there a commercial tax that's separate from the sales tax in the county?
I don't believe so. I didn't get that from her presentation.
I didn't either. Okay.
As a small business owner in the county, I can tell you that my property taxes are my property taxes, and my business and my residential taxes are at the same rates. So I don't believe there is a difference.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments, other questions related to Sarah Benatar's presentation? Let's move on to Sarah Dector. Anybody have any comments?
Yes, as a matter of fact, relative to the comprehensive plan in particular, I believe Melissa touched on the fact that there is a statutory requirement that in terms of planning, land use, and zoning decisions, that it is required that what is in the comprehensive plan be evaluated in making those decisions. And she also touched on one other thing that is, I think, important to the area plans, and that is that they go beyond what sometimes is really a minimum that is required in the county code. That is something that the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, I think, well, engendered quite a bit of discussion about dark skies and the lighting involved in a change in the, let's say it was Kachina Village, because the requirements that we wound up in the end were based on what the area plan called for, not just what the zoning code requires, but the area plan itself. We have similar things such as dark skies and the requirement that Doney Park meet Zone 2 standards for commercial development. And this has become a rather important part of it in zoning and planning and land use decisions at both the Planning and Zoning Commission level and at the Board of Supervisors, and of course at staff level. So thank you very much for mentioning those, Melissa. And I think it's kind of hard to emphasize those enough.
You're welcome, John, and we will talk about this more and more as we get into the policies, so it becomes crystal clear how they will get applied moving forward. So.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments, concerns, or capsulated thoughts on Sarah Dector's presentation?
One other thought I have real quick, Brian, is that especially with respect to the trails, the Flagstaff Regional Plan is very detailed in that respect. And I think when you saw the map that she posted there were a lot of disconnects that ended right there at the city-county line. And I think it'll be important for us as we move forward to ensure that that's a well-coordinated effort rather than those disconnects and dead ends that occur at a city-county intersection like that.
I wasn't sure what the difference was between the blue lines and the red lines that she had on her map either.
We'll have to look at that. I didn't see the legend either, Brian. We can look at that later.
Yeah.
I think, sorry, go ahead.
This is Jim. I think those were the different trails, right? Name trails, the Arizona Trail. There was the trails that run up through the Forest Service, and I can't remember what the name of them are off the top of my head, but that's what the different colors were, was the different trail names.
And then she did mention the FTI, or the Flagstaff Trails Initiative, which we did hear a presentation from Martin Ince about, if you remember back in March, I believe that was. And that effort has, well, it's ongoing, and it will continue to go forward to identify trails, trail connections, trailheads. So that's information that we can pull into this planning document and not have to undertake a completely separate effort with this area plan. The other tool, or the other resource we have, is the multimodal study, which you remember we heard from Public Works about, and that was Tim Dalagowski spoke to that to some degree. So that study already identified quite a few more of the road network, the bikeways, the multi-use path network. So between those two other initiatives, we'll have a lot of information to at least reference in this plan. And as the the maps change in the other along the through the other efforts, then we'll be able to make sure that this plan references those, so we're not in a static place when it comes to looking at maps.
Brian, this is Jim again.
Yes.
Her pyramid with was very interesting the way it was written out, and on the bottom it had what their vision was, what their goals were, and I put after that, what is the outcome that we, if we were to look at that pie chart, what is the outcome that we want to meet at the end of this area plan? And that was a real good model when I seen that. I'd never seen it put that way before. So if we kind of think about it that way, what is our vision? What are our goals? And ultimately, what is the outcome that we all want to see out of this plan? So good. I think that was a good point that she brought up.
Yeah, well, thanks for reiterating it, Jim. I think you're right on there. I'm sure we can get a copy of that and perhaps use it as a tool within our discussions as we move forward in our creating, you know, our vision, and from that, what policies we want.
Hey, Brian,
And
this is Robin. I would suggest that her pyramid was applicable to the city as their structure works. It did not apply to our county one, but that same format, I think, updated to reflect our process and our pyramid would be a really good thing to have very early on in our plan document.
I agree with you. I wasn't saying that we take what she had done, but rather use that structural processing. Good comment, Rob. Others? Anybody else? Melissa, are we ready to move on to, what was it? The beginning the visioning exercise?
We are, and Jim's comments were a perfect segue into what we're going to start doing next, because we are at the place where we have heard a lot of information, and we do have one more presentation. The Forest Service has committed to talking to us next month about a lot of the issues we've heard throughout our 7 months together regarding trails and access and things like that. But we are at the place now, we're pretty much ending our data analysis, our gathering of information and identifying issues. And now we're starting to really get into the visioning process. I just wanted to show this schedule to you so we can see where we are in this entire effort that we're in the middle of. So are there any questions on the schedule? I do want to get right into the next part of tonight's meeting.
Yeah, Melissa, this is Evelyn.
Hi.
It was on the agenda to have the Horseman's Lodge kind of discussed. I'm just wondering what happened there.
So that was on a previous agenda. You're right. It was on last month's, and they had contacted us and requested to be essentially put on hold for now. They are, apparently dealing with a lot of issues, as you can imagine, with all of their properties, and didn't feel at this time that they had a lot to add. However, I got a call today from one of the managers, and so we're still in communication. I talked to Brian and Rob about this, and because they've been, not in a place where they can actually commit to a meeting, we will try to fit them in when they do become available. So I'm sorry that we haven't been able to get a firm schedule.
Okay, thank you.
We'll keep trying.
Hey, Melissa, one quick question regarding that, and I apologize for violating my own rules about things outside the scope of our committee, but that Horseman's is such a huge issue with everybody here, I think.
Yeah.
Now that it is officially closed, Is the grandfathered zoning for the existing business gone?
It might. It depends on how long it will be closed. I believe our zoning ordinance, it's a year or it might be 18. I have to check on that.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
The entitlement, right? That's
I'll
a
be
good
quiet
question. Okay, any questions on this slide? I'm going to move on. I wanted to follow up on some of Sarah's talk, and we're going to start talking about visioning. We're going to go back to some of the issues that have been identified early on at our very first meeting, in fact. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what is Doney Park itself. And so if you look at this chart, you can see the total planning area is almost 43,000 acres. Of that, a fair amount is federal land, 30,000 acres, or 68%. But there's a fair amount of private land as well. And also there's a small, actually a fairly large piece of state trust land, which at some point, as we know, depending on the state land department's decision, could be sold and could become private. Right now, it's not in the mix in terms of developable acres. Next time we'll talk in a fair amount of detail about the build out of what's left of the private acreage. So we've got the data and we can look to the future as far as what is left based on today's zoning. So I just wanted to talk a little more specific about what is Doney Park. And with that, I want to talk a bit about population changes. And this information was compiled from a number of sources, and I can get into some detail if you all have questions, but very briefly, 1980, 1999, and 2000 numbers were taken right out of the 2001 area plan. And after that, then the 2010 number was based on 2010 census data at the block level. So our GIS department helped me basically cut that out. So we analyzed really specifically down to the block level, not block group, but block level, the number of people within the boundaries of the area plan. Now to get to 2020, it's interesting because the Census Bureau, as you know, they do an interim survey, and they did it in 2012, 15, and 17. And between 2010 and 2017, the survey, which is just a sample, showed a decline in population. However, the state demographer also does population statistics. And I used his numbers, and he's basically showing about a 3.3% growth rate. There was a dip in there in that decade, but that's how I got to the 2020 number, is using his growth rate based on the 2010 census data. So I think this is a pretty good estimate of the number of people that are currently in Doney Park. And then we had some talk earlier. Sarah actually had mentioned, some of the fees that the school district pays in terms of segregation. Well, the ethnicity kind of helps to underscore why that might be. So this is again based on 2010 census data. Remember that the 2010 Doney Park census designated place is a very small subset of the planning area. With the 2020 numbers, it will be pretty much, it will match the planning area boundaries, but this is just based on that kind of very concentrated circle right in the middle of the Doney Park area. But just to kind of bring us back to talking about, well, what is Doney Park? And we will get into some more numbers later on, but this is just kind of a very high overview of some statistics. And this is to set us up for visioning. And so we do want to now get right into what Jim was talking about. What does Doney Park want to be? The interesting thing about the 2001 plan is that there wasn't a vision statement in that planning document. Most of the other area plans, and certainly our comprehensive plan, has a fairly robust vision statement. And it's pretty simple. What does Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood want to be now and then in the future? And we're going to think ahead for 20 years. So basically think ahead to 2040. But to set us up for that discussion, I wanted to revisit what you all as a group brought up when we started. So what is Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood to you? And these are, if you recall, the terms that you use to describe Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. And I didn't change anything. I just took this right out of the notes from that very first meeting where we did the focus group. So just give you a minute here to refresh. And also to ask, has anything changed?
Melissa, I've got one thing to ask. Something I've had the opportunity to look at before at the P&Z Commission, and that is demographic data. Do we have a fairly, any kind of extensive demographic data for the Doney Park area, such as, we've looked at before for, say, Coconino Village, when we start looking at things like the area plan, other planning that goes with it, how we plan for the future with potential development. Is there demographic data? I think it would be useful to us in looking at this. We don't really know what the population is in terms of education, income, other data like that.
Yes, we do have that, John, and we'll look at that in more detail next month. I didn't know that there would be time to get into a lot of that tonight, but we have that from the 2010 census.
Good. I didn't want to get into that tonight, but I just wanted to know if it was available for future discussion, because I think it's fairly important and can be pretty enlightening sometimes.
Yeah, and we'll definitely dive into that. Thank you for bringing that up. But that's something that, like I said, it'll be a little dated, but I think it will be pretty relevant. The timing of the plan is interesting in that as soon as this plan will get done, I imagine the census data will be released, so we can test our estimates based on what comes out. But I'm sure it'll be interesting. But thanks, John. Yes, we'll look into that pretty hard next month. So back to this slide. Sorry.
One quick question relating to John's comment there.
Yeah.
And that is, all of this demographic data is interesting to look at, but doesn't mean a whole lot if we don't have anything to compare it to. And so I'm hoping that when we compile this data and when we start discussing it, we can have some sort of, comparison data to help us better understand what it is we're looking at. And you don't have to respond. I just wanted to make that comment.
Well, okay. I have to agree with Rob on that, because that is important. You can't look at it in and of itself, because that basis for comparison is necessary. You may find that comparing Doney Park to, say, Mountain Air, it'll be quite different. And the same thing, like taking something like that and comparing it to other areas like Valley, perhaps.
Well, what about comparing it to Flagstaff?
Or the city of Flagstaff, yes, you'll need to know that, and I think it would be very helpful in determining what kind of a vision you want, because education, income, where people are from, who we've got living here, are going to be a part of the data we need to formulate a vision, and then seek public comment on it.
It would also be interesting if we had a previous data and see what things have changed between that previous one and the current one that we have for growth, maybe income, whatever.
And we'll definitely look at a lot of that. The 2001 area plan covered some of that, and we'll take that as a jumping point for going forward in our plan.
Melissa, I want to come back to your question and re-ask if anybody has anything that's changed on here. And one of the things that I'm seeing in more depth is the wanting to keep it as a rural community in terms of my own perception and my own needs. And that's implicit, but it's not explicit in this. And that's that it's a rural community.
Hey, Brian, I would add one thing, and then based on last weekend's Doney Park 4th of July parade, that neighborly comment down there, bullet down there towards the bottom,
Yeah.
I think became all the more relevant as a result of that, and the display of neighborly and friendly behavior amongst people in our community probably hasn't been stronger for a while. So I would just say, if anything, it's been re-emphasized.
It has, and I thought that was great. I didn't know that parade was happening. I just kind of heard it from inside and went out and went, "What's going on?"
Again, I think.
And your wife is at the head of the parade.
Again, I'm going to support Rob on his comments here, and I think it is also important as we go forward and set policies in the area plan, because at one time, under our previous director of community development, his outlook was that Doney Park's going to be nothing but a bunch of 1 acre lots or smaller out there as people subdivide, and that does not fit with a rural area such as I see outlined by what we've got listed in the presentation here that Melissa has. So this business of creating policies that say, you know, let's not do all this zoning that creates this kind of thing. It provides the guidance we need when these kinds of decisions are made. And it's quite important, I think.
Any other thoughts on? Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, that was what John just said. Was something that was one of my concerns was if we increase the density by subdivision and so on, this is not going to be Doney Park anymore.
Okay, good comments. Anything else to add? Well, we've got a few more slides to look at. Okay, keep thinking about this.
This is Bernice. I'd like to add peaceful and quiet to this because it's not mentioned there, but it is very peaceful and quiet out here most of the time.
Okay. All right, so the next slide is what is important to you. And there's peace and quiet, so if these overlap.
Are you paying, Bernice?
She peeked. There are some themes here.
Yeah.
Anything to add here? What is important to you? Because the next list is long. Okay, we ready?
No, I'd like to say the wide open spaces are important to us, and I would not like to see us downsize any of the parcels, because that's what ruins a development.
Was that Monica?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Hi, Monica.
Hi.
Okay. We can come back to these. I'm going to move on. So the next slide is what are the challenges or issues? And I just would like to mention that when I was looking at this list again, I thought, well, this is pretty, and these are the issues that, if you remember, you all identified as a group when we first met in January. And interestingly, we've heard about most of these topics by our presenters.
Mm-hmm.
And so the point is that we've heard a lot of information. We'll take that information, wrap it into the goals and policies. We'll write about it in the plan. But this is an opportunity to put the last item on this list if there's anything else to think about.
One thing that comes to my mind that is not in addition to this, but is kind of a background to it, is that we're actually going to be dealing with what do we mean by build out? In other words, within the next 20 years, Doney Park's likely, the Doney Park region is going to be likely built out. And what does that mean? And how do we want to get there? And all of these are the challenges that we've got to deal with when we're dealing with that larger concept of how do we manage what remaining lands are available for development.
I think you could sum a lot of that up as rezoning pressure.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah, I would like to concur with that, and that's one of the problems. However, lot splits, which go hand in hand with rezoning in order to create smaller properties, which facilitate more building. The area plan discourages that as it is. And we at the Planning and Zoning Commission have looked at this pretty seriously when some cases have come up for rezoning. And they get a really hard look because of what's in the plan already. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
I wanted to throw an idea out there, and what I don't see on the list and that we've heard about since this list was created are cultural resource protection, and if that's something the committee wants to think about.
I would like to add also zoning code violations.
Okay, anything else to add to this?
Melissa, I want to come back to your comment. Yes, I believe that preserving archaeological and historic sites are important.
Yeah, I was going to second Melissa's comment also, and I think one thing that was mentioned by Sarah about the requiring a professional archaeologist to review your site before you can do anything might require some additional consideration also. I hope we can think more about that before we jump into that boat.
Okay.
I think that would be really difficult to try to implement.
I can speak to that a little bit because we had a new subdivision come up, planning and zoning for action, and we discussed this quite a bit. We're pretty limited as to what we can do, even with conditions that you may require as part of a subdivision or a use permit. So I kind of have to remind myself sometimes this is Arizona. We can create policies that would encourage people to voluntarily submit to conditions that would preserve cultural sites and artifacts. But there's nothing that says that we have to do that or it's mandatory. It's very difficult to do. Surely,
it is something the area plan can discuss, and
yeah.
you know, and policies can encourage it. It may discourage developers from doing subdivisions. That type of development, then, you know, that's an added cost to that type of development. It's also can be looked at as a benefit in terms of, you know, added interests and protection and character. So it's something to think about. We won't answer it tonight.
Yeah, it's certainly worthwhile exploring as part of the policies in the area plan.
Okay, anything? Yes.
This is Evelyn. I was just wondering what the lighting as development increases, what it might fall under in this list.
So the discussion about the dark skies, is that what you're thinking about? Okay. We can add that to this list just to ensure that the dark sky, and it's a pretty strong ordinance. So remember the dark sky requirements, the lighting ordinance is actually an ordinance, as Rob is well familiar with, that it's a requirement for new developments, new commercial developments primarily, that they have to meet the requirements of that ordinance. So that's actually happens regardless of the area plan, although the area plan has adopted a stricter lighting zone without getting too technical into zones 1, 2, or 3. So
I
but
guess my question would be, how would we enforce it in neighborhoods, individuals, or to get them to know?
Okay. What was that, Monica?
I'd like to add one comment to that.
Don't worry about it. My phone's going berserk.
Okay, sorry.
Just very
that come
briefly,
under code enforcement?
Yes.
Okay, good point. Put that under code
one other
enforcement.
thing, the Navy did a study of the area surrounding Flagstaff, and residential lighting is only about 10% of the total lighting that you have to deal with in achieving dark sky, compliance, dark sky environment. The biggest problem is commercial lighting. But if it's residential, hey, choose your battles very carefully. Code enforcement is the mechanism you use.
And remember what Mark Stento had mentioned is that he is actually our lighting enforcement person now. And I don't know, I sent a brochure to the committee that he sent to me in terms of lighting. Did everybody receive that? Because
yes.
a large part of what he was talking about was education. And I think, Evelyn, to your point, how do you get your neighbors to be dark sky compliant? Part of it is education. Part of it is talking to your neighbors, handing out things like brochures. And then if that doesn't work, then we can get Mark Stento involved.
But most of the time, what I found in our neighborhood, if you talk to them, and that flyer is excellent, and hasn't changed in the last 5 years, neighbors get it. And if you give it to them, our neighbors have changed their lighting. So I think it's not something to be offended, because most people do get dark skies. They do know how beautiful the dark skies out here. And I think it's just ignorance. And that flyer is wonderful.
And he is good, and he's going to actually update that, but that's what he had right now. So
yeah, that was an old one. Yeah, that's the original one.
Yeah, so he's working on a newer one, and we'll get that to everybody as soon as we've got something. Okay, are we ready to move on? So this, again, we can keep working on this, but this is to set us up for, one more slide. Remember this? This was the symbol,
yes.
The initial image that symbolizes Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood. And I don't know if Jess is still with us, but I said to him, I thought this image should go in the plan at some point. So this
with
was
stars.
And stars. Okay, that's what we're talking about.
Still with you, Melissa.
Hi, Jess.
I want to know what those dots are underneath the elk.
A highway division. Or is that
drop?
Everybody needs a comedian. Okay, so stars, we'll start thinking about stars on this. Adding stars. So this brings us to this slide where we can start to envision, what does Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood want to be in 20 years? The statistics and the demographics that John mentioned will play into this somewhat, but this is also, visioning is an exercise. It's really a brainstorming, free flow exercise that we will get from the committee. You all will develop a vision statement, and I'm just giving you suggestions. And then we will take your vision statement out to the community in a survey, in an open house, and have confirmation that way. So what I put up here is our 4 categories, and you can change this in any way. These are just some suggestions. This follows somewhat what the comprehensive plan did, what Belmont did, what our newer area plans did. Their vision statement was a 4-part vision because there's so much to cover. And what this also then does, it organizes ultimately the plan itself. So many of the chapters in the plan will fall pretty much under one of these categories. So when you start thinking about this, and it is 7:30. What we've scheduled is if we get pretty far tonight by 8 o'clock, great. If not, we'll come back to this next month. But thought we would start with natural resources, open space, and environment. And I know prairie dogs are maybe not loved by everyone, but we've heard that they are important to the ecosystem. So I put this in here. But these are just some prompts to you as a committee to start throwing out ideas that we'll capture. And then we will put in and start crafting a vision statement. So keep in mind, these are about a paragraph long, but you can make them what you want. And we are starting from scratch because we didn't have an exact vision. I mean, you can sort of get an idea from the 2001 plan what Doney Park wanted to be, but it wasn't quite specific. So I'm just going to let you look at this for a bit, and then if anyone wants to start filling in some blanks, we will take notes, because ultimately this is your vision for Doney Park in 2040 in terms of the natural resources, open space, and environment. What would you want it to look like? What are your priorities? How does it reflect your lifestyle? What are your values?
I'm going to chime in, and I think one of the big ones for me is that we value the biodiversity and the cultural diversity of our region, of our Doney Park, Fernwood, Timberline area.
I'll back that up and state that we value the open space that goes along with that biodiversity and the rural nature.
Ditto that, Monica.
I might say we value the history of this particular part of the world or the country, and that we would like to preserve some of that in terms of the things that we do when we move forward.
I think Monica said it, but just to make sure, rural, but also just the environment, the mixed flora and fauna that we have here, and that there's no boundaries. And I guess that it would be rural, but more environment. It's just not all buildings. It's a lot of just natural environment and
also the wildlife
habitat and the wildlife. Correct. Yep. And I like the next one that says we will work with. Can we go on to the next one?
Oh yeah, these are just some prompts, so
okay.
It's free flow
Because I
here.
love it. We will work with each other. I mean, that's how this is going to all pan out.
I was going to say that what we value probably the most is what makes us different from Flagstaff, and that is that rural community character that all of us benefit from without the density and the restrictions that a city places on you.
I'm also thinking
we've always been known that we rely on each other, not on the city. That's a known thing.
Yeah.
This is Evelyn. I'm just thinking that we should consider working with the agencies that are trying to help us. The county does a lot of things to try to help our area, try to help us, has our concerns in mind. And I sometimes hear people kind of bad-mouthing the county.
Usually the people that don't vote. I'm sorry.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Well, some of the bad mouthing may have come from the flooding incident, which wasn't pretty, but I think we can overcome.
That's something.
I want to go back to the value. I think we value the dark skies, because there's an old saying with national parks, half the park is after dark, and half of our life out here is in the dark, and the capacity to see the skies.
Okay, this is a lot for this one portion. And would you like to move on to the next one? We'll come back to it.
To finish. Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Who is that?
This was Evelyn. I just thought it'd be kind of fun to finish this, and we will safeguard. Just kind of get some ideas there.
How about we will work to maintain the existing rural character of Doney
And
Park.
protect.
I like that, John.
Maintain and protect.
Right. Maintain and protect.
The character and lifestyle.
Hey, even better.
Okay. Any thoughts on safeguarding?
The wildlife.
Melissa, you're doing double duty tonight without our note takers.
Well, I am recording this, and Jessica offered to watch the video later. We'll see.
Yes.
Well, this is pretty broad, but to safeguard our values so they can be transferred to future generations.
That's pretty broad.
It is.
But it's pretty, Brian, but it's pretty.
Well,
I don't know how we
20 years
define
out,
that we
so-
would do that.
Safeguard. Safeguard.
How about to safeguard the natural ambiance of the Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood area
The ambiance.
as a rural community?
That's nice, John.
Yeah, what?
It's important to define our community as rural in the envisioning and throughout.
It is a rural community, and it always will be. Even though Flagstaff is as close as they are, we are still always going to be a rural community.
And that, of course, goes right along with something others than myself have mentioned, and that is the pressure to create smaller lots to create greater density on the part of those who would like to take that away and make a little money on it.
So that goes under, we will work to preserve or to maintain.
Yep.
2.5 acre lots.
Well, what I wrote down was work to maintain and protect rural character and lifestyle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian, I wouldn't stipulate 2.5 acres because we have areas that are 5 acre or 10 acre minimum, 40 acre minimum.
Yeah.
I said that because I live on 2.5 acre. As soon as I said it, it's too limiting.
Yeah. Yeah, I live on an acre, so it doesn't, but yeah.
And remember, a vision is pretty high level. So when you get into specificity at the policy level, so. Okay, we'll come back to this. What I'll do is put together a draft, paragraph on this part of the vision statement, and then you all can change it as you like. You can change the heading, you can add different types of questions to this, but again, these are some prompts to get us started because it's important to start really narrowing this down so we can move forward. The next slide I had was related to community character and values. And there is obviously some overlap, but this can be reinforced, or this is maybe something that you all would not choose to define as part of the vision statement. It's just, it does
support while protecting. It's kind of redundant.
It's somewhat redundant. This is, and I want to remind you that Doney Park, Timberline, Fernwood has a design review overlay. So when you start talking about community character and values, that does apply to design. It applies to architecture. It applies to appearance. So yes, I think that that is something that can be a little more specific. If you like, I can read you what Belmont wrote to give you some additional information on that. Would you like me to read you Belmont's community character values? Okay. Belmont will continue to attract residents and businesses with its unique quality of life, natural beauty, hidden historic gems, and ability to combine the best of rural and urban lifestyle with notable resiliency. Belmont is a diverse community fostering a quaint, small-town feel, known for its close-knit social connections. It successfully supports a neighborhood commercial center, industrial and military uses, highway traveler services, and tourist destinations while simultaneously protecting animal habitat and migration routes. So they're different. It's different in Belmont. Some similarities though. You've got a major transportation corridor going right north and south through the community, bringing in lots of tourists through your community. And that can be looked at to some degree as a resource. Belmont looked at it as a resource. It was something that they thought and worked real hard about how to balance that. And that middle picture is obviously, it's a reconstructed ruin at Eldon Pueblo, and then just some of the images from around Doney Park. And I have to say, when we were putting together the story map and looking at all the photos, there's a lot of diversity in Doney Park, but also a lot of uniqueness. People really, really like their tractor art, for instance, the wagon wheel theme. This is sort of starting to define what the character in Doney Park is, and it is different than in Belmont. It's different than other areas of the county.
Well, Melissa, I'd like to add a little something on that relative to the design reviews. I've talked to you about this before, but I think the very distinct areas within Doney Park should be emphasized a little bit more than the current area plan when you talk about a design review. Second Chance, or what is now High Country Humane, is appropriate for something along Highway 89. However, when you get out Townsend Winona Road a ways towards Winona, or even in the middle of Doney Park, that may not be appropriate as far as the design of the structure. And we really do look at that at the county level pretty thoroughly. That was a very important part of the last design review that the Planning and Zoning Commission did. So I think the emphasis placed on that in terms of policy is very important, because sometimes people forget about that. And if you get used to looking at something that may be suitable in a suburban or urban environment, it's just not going to work, say, at Silver Saddle. And I'm going to single out Rob Wilson here as far as his structure goes. It's a perfect fit for Doney Park in terms of the design. And that's the kind of thing that, yeah, thanks, Rob, that needs to be emphasized perhaps a little bit more. And that there's some very distinct areas of Doney Park that need to be considered when that's done. It would be great guidance for the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Supervisors.
And so am I hearing that that's an important point to raise in the overall vision for community character?
I think so, because to ignore those distinctions based on where you are in Doney Park is to really ignore part of the purpose of an area plan.
And that's, Doney Park's big. It is the biggest area plan, I believe, in terms of acres.
And we talked early on about the differences in the different geographic areas here and the different unique characteristics to each one of those. And I think that's something that's important to continue to reflect in that area plan, and how some things may or may not be appropriate in one, but perhaps in another.
I like that idea. I think that's actually at the core of what we want to end up with, is that we're going to, how shall I say this, allow for different enclaves of community values to exist within the larger region. Or
And
community.
the kinds of policies that we have in this regard are important, but how we emphasize them is also important, because the last design review that I participated in, one of the things I heard was, well, without making any changes, it meets the code. Well, that's not what we want. We want it to go beyond that. And I believe Melissa made this point earlier in the evening, that design review goes beyond the basic requirements that may be in zoning code. A rusty Quonset hut may work and meet the building code and the zoning code, but in some areas where people are going to see that, such as driving down 89, which is a gateway to Flagstaff, and Doney Park is that gateway, that isn't going to fly if you have policies that say, no, it needs to reflect the neighborhood more. So that's just something to think about.
So John, you just said a word, an important word that the committee might want to emphasize, and that is gateway. And what does that mean for the community? 89 and to some extent Towns in Winona are major corridors for people coming into Flagstaff, going up to the parks. So what does that represent in terms of community character for Doney Park?
Here's a good example. Bill's Welding. When that his use permit came to the Planning and Zoning Commission, if you look at all the old ag equipment he's got lined up along the fence out there along 89, we all agreed that that was a part of that character, Doney Park. It's not just junk to some people. It says, look, this used to be a rural area. This is what people used years ago. It's almost like an ag museum out there of times past.
Hey, Melissa, I think your question about
made the cut.
Your question regarding the gateway concept, I think that's your planner is overcoming you there, because I don't think most of us think about ourselves as being part of a gateway. I think we're a community that is somewhat separate from Flagstaff on purpose, but as far as the gateway concept, I don't know that we vision ourselves that way.
Well, good point of discussion.
I would have to say that that comes up when you look at commercial property along Highway 89. It's not so much the gateway, but does it fit with Doney Park and the image that people have of Doney Park? Do we want to have it look like Loop Road out there by Western Truss and the salvage yards coming into town through Doney Park? Because that's sort of the thing that says, well, gee, everybody who lives out here doesn't care about what the heck it looks like. And I don't think that's what we want.
I think it'll be important when we get to the point of our public meetings and that public comment periods, that the residents of this area recognize that we have realized each of them live in unique areas and have unique needs, desires, definitions for their communities. So I think it's more important that we designate those now.
Yeah, and what people here in Doney Park think about it is more important, rather than simply saying, yeah, it's a gateway to Flagstaff. No, not quite. Our vision for our area is what's important, just like Rob said.
I crossed the word out.
Well, I'll tell you that people my age understand it is a gateway. Those 30, 40 something year olds, they're not retired. We're still going traveling. We still know what it's all about. We still like having the accessibility to cabins and things like that when we go into other communities. So I beg to differ with you for the 40 somethings.
Speak more about that, Cameron, in terms of how that's looked at as a gateway.
Yeah, absolutely. So So,
I think we're headed in different.
So we were just in Utah, and the 89 is family friendly. It's cabins. It's places for people, for tourists and visitors to really appreciate the beauty of what an area is and not shut it off. And so to take a community and say, we're just going to shut it off from everybody because that's the way we want it, well, doesn't let everybody else experience it. Just let everybody else experience our trails, our beauty, what makes us unique. So, you know, I completely differ. I'm not retired. I still go around. I still travel. I still appreciate those viewpoints for other people. So, and that's my viewpoint.
Well, I'd like to say that that's really the purpose of a design review, because when you get to the design review stage with commercial development, that's the opportunity to speak to the Planning and Zoning Commission and tell them, look, that's what you want. You want to be able to see what you just described. And having a policy that says that has to be considered should be part of our area plan. It's not just retired folks. No, it's got to be for everybody.
And I agree with Cameron. This is Liz. We just were saying biodiversity and biocultural and bio-age, I guess. I mean, there's so many different. And if you're a commercial person out here, do you want to be able to attract travelers to your store like Silver Saddle? I mean, that's just a hub. Everybody, when you go there, when I was taking surveys for Brian, half those people weren't even from Doney Park. They were traveling through. So do we want to attract that? Do we want to keep them here? I mean, I think it's great we're having this discussion from two different age sets, two different culture. I mean, I think that's why we're doing this.
Well,
so thank you, Cameron.
We have specific, regional activity areas already designated on the map. And as those get built out, there isn't going to be a lot of flexibility or control beyond that. So, and they're not far from that already, to be honest. So we're more of a community than we're ever going to be a gateway to something or attracting things. And Cameron, I hope I didn't cause any misunderstanding there. I'm not saying we shouldn't include anyone. But when Melissa says gateway, to me, that's how are we defining ourselves as the entry to Flagstaff? And that's just not how I envision our neighborhood, our community. We're unique in ourselves, and we're not a entry to Flagstaff.
I don't look at it as an entry to Flagstaff. I look at it as an entry to the beautiful parks up north.
Sure.
Go the other way. Don't go towards Flagstaff. We're that gateway to everything that's open in northern Arizona. Yeah. We don't capitalize on that. I mean, past us, what is there? Cameron, that's the next thing. And then you're on the reservation, I mean, we're it. We are the gateway to those amazing opportunities and to those educating of people to see what's beautiful around where we live.
And understanding the Colorado Plateau.
I got in the middle of something Liz was going to say there.
I was just going to say, and understanding the Colorado Plateau, it's an amazing, unique area. And whether you're going south or whether you're going north, we are an amazing platform that just was risen up. I think it's something to consider. We're just not residential. I kind of agree. We have to have a broader vision than we're just a residential community. I mean, people come up, I know from Phoenix, maybe your shooting range, but some of my friends come up and that's what they're headed for. They don't live here. They're just coming here for the opportunities here to camp and hike and go to a shooting range that's out in a beautiful environment.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
welcome everyone. Yeah. We have to welcome everyone, not close or be exclusive.
Yeah. And that's what I've seen, in all these other communities. If anyone's ever driven up the 89, I mean, I do business all over northern Arizona with our disabilities community. But, you go into Kanab, you go up into, into Duck Creek, you go into all those areas, and they have absolutely invited it and created this. I mean, it's it's cabin beautiful central. I mean, it's little cabins after little cabins after little cabins, so people that can experience the creeks and the beautiful and, you know, everything that's out there that place has to offer. And I understand that we've got our activity areas that are pretty limited, but, you know, even those we've limited further. So I mean, it's just something to keep an open mind about. That's my opinion on it.
I think we are not in disagreement. I'm not in disagreement on that. The thing that I think back when people were was to say that we see what Prescott Valley has become, the world's longest strip mall, and that is not the kind of thing that we want.
No,
and at least you would be surprised in other parts of the country how these things have developed into something like what we don't want to see. A strip mall. State of Vermont had to deal with this a number of years ago because they had a situation very much like Prescott Valley. So I think what Cameron is saying is extremely relevant here to how we look at this and the policies that we will ask people to look at in this upcoming area plan.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we all have to drive on 89. This isn't a little rural road. I mean, we've got to face reality. So Gateway is what we are, I think. But
I want to come back to what John said in that, now I'm trying to think of the words I'm hunting for. But basically that we're a community, and I think preserving our community character is one of the essences of what we want to keep. And we would lose that if we turned it into a strip mall.
well, we're not talking strip mall.
Well, I understand that, but I want to be clear that that's one of the values. We got to look not only at what we want, but we also got to be cognizant of what we don't want. And, you know, I'd love to see Loop Road for that area to be cleaned up, if you will. I don't like driving through it, but then it's their private property and I don't have a lot to say about it. But I would like to see some of those, I want those businesses to succeed, because you can go out to U-Picket and get some good material, but at the same time, it's an eyesore.
Well, but that's, you know, that's what the plan committees and stuff are for. You know, when you're talking about design reviews and things, you know, we're in a different place than when that was built. So, you know, when we, you know, we're not even looking, it's apples to oranges. I mean, the design committee is pretty stringent on what they want, what they're looking for, what you know, matches the topography and the environment of this area. So, you know, I'm not saying that we make things junky. I'm saying we make things inviting.
Inviting. Very good.
That's a good word, Cameron.
Okay, just consider one thing, the dollar store on 89. If you're out in Ash Fork, take a look at their dollar store. The hearing, the design review on this, and the one in Kachina Village went the same way. The one in Kachina Village was described by another applicant for another permit as the Taj Mahal of dollar stores. Now, a big white block box down there on 89, I don't think we want to see that. That's the result of what we get with the design review.
Yeah,
Right.
That Dollar Tree's amazing with the faux rust on the side and just the rustic look of it. It's amazing. And I shop there probably for a couple reasons, that it looks so good, and the fact that it's not an eyesore. You know, the fact that it's convenient and it doesn't just stick out. So I agree with that, and I agree with the planning committees. I think that's the only way to keep things looking and being the way they are. So.
And just on that note, you know, the design standards that are in the current plan have been applied to those projects. So those are working from what I'm hearing. So that may not need a lot of work. We'll look at those specifically, but this plan is in a good place that way, because that's what's what's already been utilized for these projects in the last 20 years. So I'm just going to look at it's about 5 till, I believe. 5 till 8.
Yes.
What I can do, if you all are, you think there's actually quite a bit, there are a lot of ideas that have come out of this discussion for community character and values. I think we can put a draft together for you to look at next time. I thought what we could do is we won't linger on the next few slides, but just to, again, prime you for next month's discussion. And what I can also do is send you some more prompts so to prepare for next month. Would you want to do that? Would you want to move on at this point? Okay,
Yes.
seeing some thumbs up there. So the next header would be land use, growth, development, and partnerships. This will take a lot of discussion.
Yeah, plan growth should provide. Yeah, plan growth. Okay.
And there are a lot of other prompts that we could add to this, but this is a big one. Obviously, we've touched on a lot of the concepts already, and just to start thinking about that in terms of a vision. And again, these are just ideas and suggestions. You can change this however best suits this particular group and this particular area plan update. And then the final category that is all by itself is transportation. Because it's been a big topic of discussion, right? There are a lot of pieces that fit into this part of the puzzle in terms of roads, the separated paths, the trails, the bike roads, the social trails, things like that. So I actually had 2 slides. I forgot to take one out, but here are more pictures for transportation. Same identical content though. So that would be for next time. And then speaking of next time, the next meeting would be scheduled for the August 13th. We do have the Forest Service on board to talk real specifically about, land exchanges, trails, trailheads, parking, their land management plan. They've just adopted a new forest management plan and what that means. So that would be the last presentation, other than if and when we do have the Horseman's Lodge people available to come talk to you. And I thought we would just fit them in when they have time. So then next time we will work real hard to get this visioning portion finished, at least as far as a draft, and then you all can look at it and refine it as we go. We'll talk more about these rural activity centers and the build out, and then we'll talk about the demographics, because the next part of the we're going to move really quickly here into designing a community survey. We'll figure out a virtual open house, and we will start working on policies, because ideally we'll have 2 open houses with the community, and one will be to really look at the issues, look at the vision, confirm those with the community, and then the next open house would be to really look at the policies and the draft document. So, but it's all up to you. I mean, you're the committee, you're leading this. These are just, again, suggestions for how to move through the process. So any questions on this?
Yeah, I've got a thought to share, and that is that a virtual open house for something that is going to kind of define the next 20 years of development in our area, to me seems like a really bad idea. And I recognize we're in unique times that require unique solutions, but I wonder if, I don't think that we should let a deadline, a kind of arbitrary deadline, drive us into something that results in a product that doesn't live up to the standards of what we would want it to be. I mean, this work has to sustain 20 years of tests. And just because we delay it a couple of months so that we can have actual open houses, I don't think is a bad thing.
I have to agree with Rob Wilson on that, because I, for one, miss the interpersonal part of doing these things. I've participated in them. They may not necessarily be well attended, but the people who do attend have got plenty to say, and they have a lot of very good suggestions. And this is the way it works. And Melissa knows this, for the open house we had on the update to the zoning ordinance. We didn't have a vast crowd of people, but We had a lot of very interested people, well, as many as came, and there was a lot of good discussion that went with that. So I personally find it very difficult to work with this. And as far as an arbitrary deadline, you know, I know we were presented with when we wanted to have this finished, but when I worked in engineering, I worked for a guy who said, yeah, budgets and schedules are important, but they're just a guideline. And if you don't meet your schedule, that's not important. The results are important. So there it is.
So are we limited to one or the other, or can we try to do both? Can we have an in-person and a virtual?
We could do both.
Well, I'm thinking we might even do more than that, because couldn't we do something potentially by mail or email where we get, I think there's multi ways of getting information back from people.
Well, the surveys, Brian, would be the ones that we would use by mail or email, or
This is an open house.
you know, the Survey Monkey or whatever tool we use to do that with.
Right.
But I think we'd be missing something if we don't have an opportunity to have face-to-face open conversations with folks that really care about our community.
And I totally agree with you, Rob. I think we do need to have some face-to-face, and it may be that it's January or February or longer before that happens. So we can continue working on different aspects, but remain open to public input along the way.
And I'd like to just go back to Cameron's point about having both. You know, right now the county is obviously following pretty strict guidelines in terms of opening back up to the public, and so, you know, we as a group would be following, would be following under the county limitations in terms of numbers. And right now, you know, we're not being able to gather more than 10 people. So I think as we move forward through this whole pandemic, you know, we'll figure out at what point can we actually have an open house if we need to somehow limit the number of people. There are ways to do that, you know, sell free tickets, for instance, or, you know, give out free tickets. The other thing is we do have some tools. We have another online tool that is specifically designed for planning workshops like open houses. So I'll show that to you all and see how you feel about it. If you feel comfortable, we could do that as a test and maybe see how many people actually participate. From what I've read and just in all the planning literature, there's a lot of information that those actually generate more participation. I totally agree with you about the face-to-face and talking to people. Nothing can replace that, but because the online forums, it's more convenient for a lot of people, it can bring together, or rather get us a higher participation rate. So we're certainly wanting to meet everybody's needs in terms of what works best, but I will put that together and show you how it looks, and we'll see how you feel about that.
I just want to be as inclusive as we possibly can be and give everyone an opportunity, whether they're tech savvy or not.
Yeah.
To have
Right.
input to this.
That's why I look at our deadline as a suggestion.
Yes, I agree with you. I'm going to steal an idea from Rob Wilson. What if we have a drive-through, a parade, and folks can drive through at some point, and this could be,
that's awesome.
Go through Cromer School or something, or some open area, and then there'd be 10 of us there, and we can safely say, well, what are your concerns? What are your ideas? And just collate them.
Hey, Brian.
It's a wacky idea, but
It could be done live online too, at the same time.
You could. That's a good idea.
Hey, Brian and Rob, this is Jess. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, one small thing. I would be delinquent if I didn't interject here a little bit on use of honestly county resources, and one of which is time. So we are committed to a work plan where we share our limited resources, staff resources, primarily Melissa's time, the rest of the planning staff, with all of the county. And we have, we have numerous area plans throughout the county. Many of them are, and we've gone through a real process once we created a long range planning position within the department to be deliberate about prioritizing updating area plans. However, there's a reason why we have goals, and we get authorization through through work sessions with the Board of Supervisors on focus, on which is the next area plan to be updated. One of the reasons we want to focus you guys on what really matters, what really counts, what's the real strength of an area plan and what it can do with its vision and its policies. But this, that's a decision that can go up. Certainly my boss, the director, Jay Kristelman, and county management staff and the supervisors in how long can we take on a project. Because we can't have, as important as this update is, and we all understand the reality that we've all been working with in the way of working remotely in the pandemic. But we're going to have to move forward at some point in all honesty, sharing the resources that the county has with all areas of the county. We have other area plans we have to update. So just wanted to throw it out. It's not an arbitrary date. It's flexible. This is about public input. This is about getting what's right for a community. So there's certainly built-in flexibility, and supervisors can help make some of those decisions. At the end of the day, there's no way we will take care of the whole county and all of the area plans that need updated if we spend too long on one. And that's where we want to help in focusing this process for what the real strength of this is. Any questions on that?
No, but hey, Jess, that's great points. And perhaps Melissa, at the next meeting, could we add an agenda item to discuss alternative ways to accomplish that public input that I think most of us here value so much in this unique time?
Hey, I'm not hearing Melissa, but that's absolutely something staff can do. That's something we've been doing. I'll tell you, our profession, the planning profession, is a buzz right now with the tools people are using. We're doing Planning and Zoning Commission every month. We are helping the Planning and Zoning Commissioners remotely, all of them, and staff remotely, make decisions, the decisions they're authorized to make through completely virtual meetings, just like you're doing right now. So one way or another, at some point in time, we have to accept reality that all of society, all of our culture is adapting to some of this. And we all hope that, we hope that on your schedule, we would be able to hold an open house. We know there's some probability that that it would look very different. And so I think the drive-through opportunity is great. I think brainstorming from the creativity of your group could really help, and staff is here to help as well in what can we do to accommodate good, important public input into this important document.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was talking, but I was on mute, and I was agreeing. So.
Yeah, drive through, even maybe scheduled appointments by people so that we maintain that under 10 number, but still allow individuals to come in and share their opinions. Might be something, but good for future agenda item.
Jess, I would like to add one thing that I think Jim Clifford has mentioned before, that what we already have in the area plan is really good. I've gone over it numerous times, and I don't think there's going to be a lot that is going to change dramatically. Adding a vision statement, yes, but substantive changes in a lot of other areas, I don't foresee that happening. So that may help assist us in getting a reasonable schedule delivered on this.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Melissa, could I ask you to do one thing?
Yep.
Just take a note on this. When you were talking about development, and we didn't get to that piece, one thing I'd like you to write down is, what do we want to preserve?
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have anybody from the public that wants to offer a comment? I don't think so. Okay.
I'd like to thank Cameron for joining us, especially throwing you in the middle of all this at this late point. I appreciate your stepping up and look forward to your inputs.
Oh, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm glad you allowed me to be thrown in the middle of all this. I know you guys put a lot of time into it and effort, so I apologize for not knowing about it earlier and being part of it earlier. So.
No
Yeah,
worries.
thanks, Cameron.
Do we have any final thoughts from committee members? What do you have there, Rob?
This is the gavel.
Oh, that's the gavel. Okay. So any thoughts, final thoughts from committee members? Melissa, I think you've done it again.
Yep.
Well, wait, one more slide. Don't go. Here's our final.
Oh my gosh, Melissa, please.
What?
All right. There we go.
That was the one budget question I wanted to ask Sarah earlier is how much do the county supervisors each get to buy pizza?
You know what? That does come out of their budget, and I don't know the answer to it, but hopefully when we do meet in person again, we'll have pizza. I haven't forgotten.
Okay.
Good night.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you. Do it, Rob.
There you go.
All right, you guys all take care.
Here's
Thank
my
you, Melissa.
reaction to tonight's meeting.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, before you all go, could I just mention one thing? And I did ask John Ruggles, if you all have a chance to look at the story map tool that we all put together, we would love any feedback you had because it can be modified. It's a work in progress, but the idea was to make that another resource for not just you, but for the community to get a sense, get a sense for what Doney Park is. So, just take a look at it, give us some feedback. We can modify it as we go.
Okay.
And
already
contributing to that, and I'm sorry to add one last thing here, 30 seconds or less. Brian and I and Melissa have talked about how do we use that tool as the beginning of what our area plan becomes in the future. Using that as kind of the basis for it, shouldn't we have an online area plan that actually works in conjunction with that tool? Think about that before the next meeting. Thanks.
Well,
okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.